James. Yeah.
Okay. So when you're done, can you just put them on, save them on the laptop?
It'll be interesting to see, I was with Intel for 20 years. I was with Intel for 20 years. Just chatting about just saying, October year. You spend a lot of time with these guys. You know, it's just like
Hi, how are you?
Key West. That they got they were well gone, but
Okay, yeah, that's fine. Perfect. Yeah, and then as soon as you see on it, I'll just send it away so that I can get it. Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, no, what I do is just yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. No, no, no. Well, it's up to you. You want it. You want Pepsi. It's up to you. Yeah, okay, grand. Hi, Trina.
Hey Sam, how's things?
Jacob's
Yeah.
whenever everybody's going to be.
Oh, yeah. I think that, yeah, where, like, actually,
Did he do his photos
Yeah.
with the guys?
I think that did she bring it in?
Yeah, it's here.
Yeah, perfect.
Hi,
Great.
Shannon, how are you?
Yeah.
Good to see you
So,
again.
yeah, no,
Yeah.
we
Sorry, my
got
hands are
them
freezing.
So these are all the awards, so, yeah.
Brilliant.
Is that okay?
And then be later on.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. When you hear your name, just stand up and go.
She is, yeah.
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 Okay. And then, that is it. Then we take the cards of the award.
Oh, perfect, yeah. So like that as well.
Yeah.
My own stuff as well.
Yeah, no,
But
exactly.
it's nice.
It was just bizarre. It was just.
Oh, I know. It's the venue.
But at least you know that.
Yeah.
At least you knew that.
Oh,
you
yeah,
won.
yeah,
So,
which
like,
was
it
lovely.
is
It
an
is
amazing.
lovely, yeah. Oh,
Okay,
yeah.
go and grab a pop-up.
Did she make it
No, like we started.
The expansion.
Okay, and I don't know where Adam is.
I thought they
Yeah,
were
where is he?
the last 5 years. US
Yeah, so I don't know.
I really like
You have your John, aren't you?
Yeah, it's still going.
Can you send the email? Is the link the same
Yeah.
for the live link?
Yeah.
Can you maybe send it now? Like, are we live already? You said
No, it's fine. It's not too bad now. It's kind of low. There's actually nobody on at the moment, so it's
okay, yeah, that's okay. I was like, oh my god, you said to be quiet, and I've been speaking for like 20 minutes. That's okay. So,
I'm sure you get onto the Wi-Fi.
Oh, no, I made sure I was on it before.
oh my god,
I didn't have time to straighten my hair, so it's
yeah, just there.
Hi.
You changed it, but you didn't. The old one is still up there.
Okay, that's fine. I'll double change it again. Sorry.
Yeah. Maybe you didn't
Oh,
save it.
no, you know why? Because we changed it in future, so I don't know, like, if you need to save maybe on
Just the order's wrong.
yeah.
If you tag nobody else, just don't matter.
No worries. I'll change it in
Don't
just
worry,
1 second.
don't worry.
I'm very sorry about that.
Actually, if you want to change it, I can just. Okay, yeah, no, sorry, apologies, Roger. Yeah. I think I'm going to die today. I think that I can't do this.
No, you're fine. You're fine over there. You're fine.
I don't know. I don't even know where Alan is. Alan is just. Oh,
Oh, there he is.
That's the answer. That's the way Chinese
Was that June for the last one?
Yeah.
That's right. My
I think it
God.
was June. Yeah.
well, do everything.
I don't know where it is.
Which is
I just sent it, the link there into the CitA
Yeah.
group.
To do, yeah, to put it on the slide.
you gotta say for you.
Is that the 12th of June? So we never sent it.
Are you running
Are
the
we
video?
not? Are we not?
We'll start now. But are we going to run the video at the start or not? Swarm video.
Sam didn't get any.
Oh, the AC High video. Send it to you.
Sam? Yeah, there is a slide.
Yeah, but there is a video we want to run, but that's fine. I'll talk to you.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I think we'll start.
Yeah. Do you remember like what would be called and what should be called? Thank you, Katie. I'm just going to send this. Yeah, just in a minute.
The contract is being done right. You know what? I don't blame the contract. I blame them. Really, here we are, contract negotiations. But in fairness, I think the Irish you think about it like
Jerry's trying to switch the mic on. Is there? Yeah.
Good morning. We're running a little bit late, so if you'd like to take your seats, we'll make a quick start.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. This, I'm told, is the fifth in the series of 6 talks organised in conjunction with the Construction Industry Council. So you're all very welcome. I'm Jerry Carty. I'm I manage RPS in Ireland, but I am also the president of ACEI at the moment. This morning, there's a really good range of speakers, and I'll just introduce them, let them give their talk, and there's a Q&A at the end of the session. So our first speaker is Alexandra Bolton. Alexandra is Executive Director of the Centre for the Digital Environment, Digital Build Britain, and has held various roles within the Department of Engineering in the University of Cambridge, has worked in both industry widely and in the city, and as a trader in a leading commodities house. So lots of experience in engineering, in law, in finance, and I look forward to hearing Alexandra's talk. Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you very much for inviting me, Alan. I'm absolutely delighted to be here. I want to tell you a little bit about what we're doing in the UK and what's working and what we're having to work hard on to try and get it to work. So, Digital Build Britain runs out a programme that's running government in the UK for the last 5 to 10 years, and it came to Cambridge in 2017. We were really lucky that we managed to keep a lot of people on the former programme and bring them into the Cambridge programme. So we're not starting from scratch, we're building on the work of some people who are much cleverer than me and have been in this business for a very long time. So we talk a lot about what is a digital built Britain, and I'm very conscious I'm here in Ireland. It could be a digital built Ireland or a digital built anywhere. It doesn't have to be specific to Britain. So we talk about the phases that you might go through when you're creating an asset or a building. So we talk about the design phase, making sure that right at the beginning, before you even pick up your mouse or your pen, you think about what data requirements do you need, what do people need to know, not just while they're building the thing, but also while they're occupying, using, maintaining, and at the end, recycling, hopefully, the thing that they're building. We then talk about what data do you need when you're actually building it? How do you share that data securely, resiliently? How do you make sure that the right people have the right data? Not that you're opening all your data to everybody, but that it's specific to the needs and wants of the groups, and making sure that you've got that collaborative way of sharing, the collaborative way of working. In the UK, we're particularly bad at the gap between building the thing and operating the thing. How do we make sure that as we finish the build, we don't just hand over a big pile of either physical notes or digital notes and the keys and say, there you go, off you go, run your thing. How do you make sure that that data is incorporated into the running of your asset? How do you make sure that as we run the asset, we learn from running the asset? We learn from what works, what doesn't, and we tweak it as we go along. And then once you've got your single asset, how do you integrate that into the environment in which it sits, into the other assets, the other buildings, the other road systems, hospitals, in which that asset sits? And most importantly of all, how do you use the data that you've collected through the lifetime of that asset to make sure when you're building a new one, you build it better, you build it quicker, you build it greener? I want to tell you a little bit about what we're calling the National Digital Twin Programme. So at the end of 2017, our National Infrastructure Commission published this Data for the Public Good report. It's online if any of you would like a little light bedtime reading. It laid out the challenges that they felt with sharing data for the public good, but it also laid out recommendations. What should we do to make that better? It came up with 3 key recommendations. Create a national digital twin, enabling digital twins to come together, to plan, to predict, to understand our built environment. To create a digital framework for the secure and resilient information management of data, of information. And we need to make sure that that data is interoperable. It's no good having silos of data in various places. You need to be able to share appropriately. And it tasked CDBB with setting up a digital framework task group, which we're now calling the National Digital Twin Programme. So you'll see both sets of languages used in the comms. And that's about providing coordination of the key players. And coordination is really important. It is not about control. It's not about us standing here saying, you must do this. It's about getting all those people in the room that need to be thinking about our data, how we share it, and how it affects our construction and our operation of our buildings. So the benefits of this national digital twin are about, bluntly, providing better outcomes for public, for the society, per whole life pound. We need to make sure that we're not just looking at the capital cost, we're looking at the whole life cost of an asset. It's got clear benefits to society. We can improve stakeholder engagement, but that will mean a better experience for people who are actually using those things. It might mean that your buses are linked in with your hospital appointments. It will mean that our buildings should produce less carbon emissions. And I was looking at the protesters yesterday. It's something that we all need to be thinking about. It should mean that people are more satisfied with their buildings, to have more input in how they use their buildings and their infrastructure. There are clear benefits to the economy. If we can use our things smarter, if we can use them more efficiently, there are financial benefits to firms and to the country as a whole. It should create new markets for business, new services, new business models, and new firms will come on board and are coming on board around this data sharing. And as I've already said, there must be benefits from the environment. We have to make sure that we're all doing our part to avert a climate crisis. So what is National Digital Twin? How do we see it? So we all know that we have transport networks, and they link together to a certain extent. We have energy networks. We need to make sure that these are working together. They need to link in with transport. What about our water networks? What about our telecoms networks? We all produce a lot of waste. How do we link these into our model? Social infrastructure, so hospitals, schools, we need to bring these together. And of course, we all live and work in places. What about our residential buildings? What about our commercial buildings, our industrial buildings? And all this has to interface with the natural environment. If we can get all these interfacing together, sharing data appropriately, we can have a national digital twin that looks at all of this. So what is a digital twin? And I know you'll be hearing from others today about their definition. For us, simply it's about a digital model of a physical thing where we take data from the physical asset, put it into our model, and then we have interventions going back. So to give you an example of what we're talking about, let's look at the rail network. I have a train, it's producing data as it runs along the tracks. Take that data to digital twin to make sure I can manage that train, its maintenance, its operation better. With that model, I then put interventions back into the physical twin, so I might know that the bogie is showing signs of wear and I need to pull it in for maintenance. It's about creating those insights and decisions from your physical asset using the data. But it's not enough just to look at the train itself. The train runs on tracks. The train uses signals. They have their own digital twins. Let's connect these up so we can look at the rail network. Then why don't we look at the transport system as a whole? Rail doesn't run on its own. It runs in conjunction with the road network. It runs in conjunction with our airports, our planes. We each connect these digital twins together, we'll get a much better outcome, we'll have a more holistic transport system. But again, it's not just about transport, these interface with the energy networks, they interface with water networks. If we can create an ecosystem of connected digital twins, we'll start getting real value from the data that each of our assets is connecting. And when you have a network of connectable digital twins, you will start seeing some real benefits, not just financially, but to society and to the environment. So how do we approach this data sharing? Well, we could have a top-down authoritarian approach where somebody stands up and says, this is the way we're going to do it. And we're calling this the authoritarian approach. Generally, that doesn't go down very well with people. We don't like being told what to do in that sense. We could have a Darwinian bottom-up approach where we talk about, let's see what the market says. Let's very much like the World Wide Web. Let's go out there and the best will win. But actually the best isn't necessarily the best for the public good. It might be best for the biggest corporation who has the most money to throw into it. We think the approach is somewhere in the middle, that it's about having some guidelines, some framework, building on what we already have, and moving forward from that. So the emerging approach we have about this data sharing is two things which we call the Commons and the Digital Twin Hub. I'll talk a little more about the DT Hub later. But the Commons is this national resource held in common across the UK, and it could be far wider than the UK, that unlocks effective information management across the industry. It's about the minimum necessary open standards and methodologies. We pulled together what we're calling the Ministry of All the Talents, a group of experts to advise us and the nation as to what would this look like. We need a place to test that, and that's what we're calling the Digital Twin Hub. And this is the collaborative web-enabled team, community team, that's actually trying these things out, is looking at what the Commons might produce and saying, well, does it work? Does it really work in real life? Posing questions back to the Commons saying, actually, you need to be thinking about this, or have you thought about that? It's a group of people who are actually doing real hands-on development of digital twins. So what is the purpose of the National Digital Twin Programme? It's about the steering and the guidance of this development of adoption of an information management framework. For us, it's specifically with the built environment in mind. But if we do this right, it should work across finance, it should work across services. It's a generic framework. It needs to provide those necessary building blocks to enable this effective information management sharing. And that data sharing, it has to be secure and it has to be resilient. And it will provide the basis for this national digital twin. It will support this connected ecosystem. So if you like, it's the web that connects all the digital twins together. We feel there are two key inputs to the information management framework. There's the Gemini principles, which were published at the end of last year, which is this guiding value, the conscience of the framework, things that we hold to be true no matter what the framework should be doing. And we need to have a prioritised plan. We're calling the roadmap. How actually do we get from where we are now to an information management framework that works? So the vision for the framework is this effective information management. We believe that when we have it in place, it will enable better decisions, will lead to these financial savings, improved performance, better outcomes for business, and most importantly, for society. We need to make sure it's in place so that we can have this foundation for the National Digital Twin. And the way I like to summarise the framework is about having the right information that is correct, that is right, to the right people at the right time. And we're talking, for us, we're talking right time, not necessarily real time. So for example, if you're looking at planning, you don't need microsecond updates of your data. It's a much slower process. I mentioned the Gemini principles. It was a very collaborative document that we put together on the Gemini principles. It took several months and hundreds of people inputting into what we felt was these founding definitions and this guiding value for this information management framework. We have summarised it with our 9 points. So we feel that every part of the National Digital Twin and the framework must have a clear purpose. And the fundamental purpose is for the public good. That's at the heart of everything we do in this programme. It's got to create value, and it's got to provide insights. It's no point having a whole bank of data that isn't providing us with things that will help us do our jobs better. People have to be able to trust the framework. They have to be able to trust the data. They have to be able to trust the National Digital Twin. There are some tensions there. So we know it needs to be secure, but we also know it needs to be open. We know it needs to be high quality data. Again, it needs to be open. So there is a big batch of work going on about how do we marry those potential conflicts and make sure that we have it as secure as possible and as open as possible. It must be able to function. It must have a function that we can define. Our view is it is a federated model, so the National Digital Twin is not a monolithic, huge twin of everything owned by a big brother who sits up there. It's about federating the digital twins that a lot of us are already starting to create. We must be able to curate that digital twin, that set of data. So life changes. I'm sure all of you know that often your bits of paper with this is what I'm going to build, or in modern parlance, your Revit model perhaps, the as built is not quite the same as what we thought we were going to build. So we need to make sure that's updated. And as you're running your asset, as you're using your asset, we need to be constantly curating our data to make sure that it's correct. And we also know that what we know now, we're going to know more, different things, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years in the future. We will have new technologies that possibly we haven't even imagined yet. We have to have a framework that is broad enough to be able to evolve as society and as technology evolves. So the National Digital Twin is this ecosystem of connected digital twins, connected by this secure and resilient data sharing. I want to talk a little about the roadmap, our prioritised plan for delivering the framework. We've talked about, within the group, splitting it into 5, and now 6 actually, areas. So there's an approach. How do we approach data sharing? What's the fundamental premise of how we're going to do this? We need to make sure it's governed really well. That just doesn't mean us and our journey towards it, but when the framework exists, how do we make sure that it's governed, that appropriate people have appropriate authority over appropriate parts of it? The commons is, as I was saying, this what we hold in common. It's the bit where we wouldn't expect there to be any commercial competition. It should be the bit that everybody looks at and says, that makes perfect sense, we all need to do this. Around the edge of it, absolutely there are places for competition and commercial businesses to thrive. But we hold this bit in common, this is what we all believe to be true. We're aware that we've called it enablers, but there are blockers out there. There are things that could stop us being able to do this, being able to have an information management framework, so we need to look at what those are. And actually, possibly most importantly, we need to look at sectoral change. We need to help people, businesses, government understand the changes that they need to make and support them in that journey. Well, this is one of those slides that, please don't try and read it, I'm very happy to share the slides later. This is how we're looking at what we need to do over the next 4 years. The yellow line in the middle is what we hope to have done by the end of this financial year, and it lays out the blocks that we should be doing and when, how it all fits together. And there are 2 little boxes sitting in the middle of the green, which are 3.4 and 3.5, for those of you who want the numbers, about information architecture. And that's where the heart of the technical work sits. But that doesn't mean it's the most important. It means it's probably the biggest in terms of time and money. But we need to make sure that we remove the blockers and that we produce the support that industry needs to adopt these things. Part of the support is the Digital Twin Hub. I mentioned it earlier. It's a collaborative web-enabled community, and I say it's web-enabled. It's also about getting people in the room and talking, because it's only so much that you can do through a web-based portal. And it's about those who are making serious progress with digital twins. This can be asset owners, it can be cities, it can be universities. We've got 6 groups at the minute who are involved in our initial startup. We're hoping that they will get together and they will be sharing their knowledge, their experience, their issues, their problems, and their successes. It's a little bit like a homework sharing club, is how I've been describing it. It's, as I say, starting small with 6 companies. So we have Sellafield, we have Heathrow Airport, we have Anglian Water, we have GLA. So a group of firms and entities working with digital twins in different areas. They've been very open with us about what they will share, and they're very keen to share their experiences. It's about producing those builders within the built, leaders within the built environment, who will build consensus, who will iterate on the Gemini principles, because it's an open and evolving document. We know we're unlikely to have got it perfectly right first time. It's about being able to use those digital twins to test out the information management framework. Does it work? What do we need to change? And about developing Gemini-compliant digital twins. So the objectives of the Digital Twin Hub, it's partly, as I say, about learning and sharing experience. It's about innovation, and we find when you get people together, they tend to innovate better, they spark ideas off each other. It's about capturing good practice so that we can support industries coming into this field with their digital twins. It's of course about enabling the national digital twin, but it's about making sure that we promote adoption of the Gemini principles and the information management framework. It's about finding pilots. Where can we find pilots that can help us address some of the gaps in the knowledge? And it's also about providing a support network and a register, if you like, of where the good work is happening. So why did we create a hub? Why did we just not have digital twins in various places doing their own thing? We very much felt that having this digital twin hub community allowed us to verify and to validate the work that's been done so far in CDBB and also inform others about what's happening. We feel very much that this learning by doing and the overcoming by sharing will lead to success together. As I said, we've started with 6 because we felt it was much better to start fairly small and expand in a hopefully controlled fashion. We're very much looking forward to having other firms, other groups involved soon. So what sort of challenges do we think the Digital Twin Hub is going to have? Well, first question, what is a twin? There's a lot of discussion about what is a twin, what is not a twin. How do you make data accessible to the twin? And I've written all data here, but how do you make sure that the correct data, the appropriate data is made accessible to the twin? How do you manage our legacy assets? In some ways, having a twin of something that you're about to build now is, I don't want to say easy, but it's easier than a building that's been around for 800 years. How do we integrate the assets that we consume, that we go through, that we use, rather than actually own? What solutions should we use? What skills do we need? We know there's a lot of work to be done on helping the industry, helping individual people upskill. And how do we get executive buy-in? I can stand here talking, but if the boards of companies are not interested, this isn't going to happen. We talk about the value that we feel you can get from a digital twin. So as digital twins mature, at the beginning it helps you in your planning accuracy when you're in the design and build phase. You'll start to get efficiency gains and risk reduction. Once those come in place, you'll start to understand better your asset and how it's working. This should lead to increased productivity and optimization of the use of your asset, which in turn will allow you to make sure your asset is far more resilient to financial crisis, to physical crisis. And you should have a twin that is adaptable to those things that change in life, in business, in the world. All those will add more and more value. We hope to get to a stage where people will be looking at the digital twin as, why would I not do this? It makes such business sense. I may have to pay a little bit more at the beginning, but actually it's making such business sense, I must have one. So what are we asking people to do now? Now we're looking at industry, IT, consultants, cities, government, academics, all together. We've got 64 people signed up for the Digital Twin Hub as it is. We're always welcome to more, both from the UK and internationally. To register on the CDBB website to join the existing DT Hub team, it will be a phased approach, so we're looking, as I said, to start small and then expand in a controlled fashion. And we're due to release the online DT Hub platform in the next few months with this continued growth of the overall membership. We've created a Digital Twin Hub steering group, which is chaired by Sam Cholton, formerly of Daphne, the data analytics for the National Infrastructure Centre. And they are working to create a roadmap based on the chart I showed before about the involvement of digital twins and identifying the resulting business values, because we know we have to be able to put this down to why should a business do this. We're having a survey of how are digital twins currently being used across sectors, not just in the built environment sector, but across sectors. We want to create a complexity matrix outlining the uses and complexities related to the creation of digital twins, so that we can look and see where the benefits are and how that will work. We'll be producing a report outlining the strategic approach to incorporation of digital twins within industry and within government. And we're incredibly lucky that the UK government is very much bought into this, so we have a very open conversation with them. We need to collect best practice so that we can escalate the common strand, this technical piece that we all hold in common of the information management framework. And we at CDBB are really keen to support practitioners and company executives as they look to adopt and evolve their digital twins. We're very aware that there are some absolute experts in digital twins out there. They don't all sit on company boards, so we need to be able to provide the support for those board members to understand, technically to a certain extent, but from a business perspective, why they should be working here. We want to have a lot of guidance and consultation for and with the members of the Digital Twin Hub so that we can accelerate and facilitate the National Digital Twin Challenge. I hope that's given you a very quick summary of what we're doing at CDBB. I'd be really happy to answer questions in the question session or afterwards. Please come and catch me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alexandra. That's a very good introduction to the Centre for Digital in Britain and what they're doing. Our next session is on digital twins, and it's a presentation by three individuals from Trinity College. Anand Murshi, if I've got that pronunciation right. Anand is an engineer and a tech entrepreneur, and Anand relocated to Dublin and has been a contributor at CitA and many other global events. So Anand, Greg Power is Head of Capital Projects and Planning in Trinity, and Professor Roger West is a Chartered Engineer and Fellow of Trinity College and has served on the board of CitA. So the three presenters, I'm not sure what order you're going to do this in, but basically it's a 360 degree view of the digital twin. So I think Greg is going to start us off. Thank you very much, Greg.
Very much. Try and make this full screen if I can. Okay, thanks very much for having me here. I wanted to talk a little bit about the business school, if we could, today, and I'm coming at this from the perspective of the client. You probably know Trinity College around the corner, 52 acres in the middle of the city, and the business school is just at the tip of the first blue arrow, not too far away from the railway line there, on the site of the old Luce Hall. And I'm also going to put out an apology here at the start if I insult anybody in the room who are practitioners in the BIM field, architects, engineers, builders. It's a whole heap of you here. And if I do gravely insult you, I'm sure it won't be for the first time. Trinity has got, like I said, 52 acres in the middle of the city, but we've got a fairly decent, I suppose, vintage in the city as well. About, you know, a couple of 100-year-old buildings, a few 200-year-old buildings, and a few 300-year-old buildings. And might also challenge the principle that BIM is actually better suited for modern buildings. In fact, some of the work we're doing on some of the historic buildings in making digital twins of them is actually working out quite well. The reason being is we can actually pick the stuff the user wants, the clients want, and we're not fussing around with finding out how many tons of steel are in the basement and trying to employ people to strip that back at a later stage and spending a fortune on it. So about 2 million visitors come across the threshold of the campus every year, and about 1 million visit the Book of Kells and a whole lot of people in between. So it's the size of a decent sized town, I suppose. But we've got a good capital building program as well. About 1.4 billion on the go at the moment. One of the papers in the pack showed 285 million. I think that might have been an earlier stab at the strategic plan totals. About 470 million in the first few projects to see there. And the big one here, Trinity at Grand Canal Dock, will be one of our smart cities attempts to build a 5.5 acre campus down at TTech. Our first foray into BIM was the medium voltage project in the bottom right, which was a civil engineering click and forget BIM job for me. 10.5 million on time and on budget, and I have to say, with respect, BIM didn't contribute at all to the job. And that was, it did for Mercury, who I know used it quite effectively, and for AECOM, who designed it. But the day after, 13 ring main units, 12 transformers, 3.5 kilometres of cable, and a lot of digging. Thankfully, with no outages, because we were doing this dental work while the college was still operating. It was a BIM model that we haven't really used since that day. The Trinity Business School on the top left is the candidate job we're talking about now at the moment. But Feldon Clegg Bradley, our BIM aware, and our Arab team working on the E3, Dartry, Ready Architecture, our HABS project, a historic accommodation building project, is going to be a 320-year-old BIM project, and the 1712 building by Burr in the bottom left, Trinity Visitor Experience in our old library, will be a BIM level 2 deep retrofit as well, fairly expensive one of the old library. Next in from the left on the bottom, under construction at the moment by Bennett's, who are using BIM 2, along with McCullum Mulvan, JV Tierney's and O'Connor Sutton Cronin. So we've got quite a bit on at the moment, and BIM is interesting to me. No, I'm also not a Luddite. I would be regarded as the office nerd, actually. When it comes to this type of stuff, I'm very happy with the idea that we transformed our offices in Trinity when I worked here before, and also when I knew I Galway, from using a pencil and getting the first roll in DPX plotter. You remember the ones that used to go and grab the pen and go and do a dot, and then go and put the pen back and grab another one and do those lines? People used to come and watch them in the office. So I'm quite happy with the idea of bringing new systems in to bring some, and I'm not getting old and cynical, I just have questions about the value of how BIM is working at the moment. So the business school, to talk through a couple of perspectives. The architect, Scott Town Walker, did a fine job of taking the Foster-esque napkin sketch in the top right picture that was probably drawn on an airplane by David Cowell somewhere, and turning it into a fine building. But also we had some good quality survey and Matterport's scans done of the area to start establishing the baseline for it. This obviously rapidly evolved into the BIM model. And later on I have a small diagram which I drew, although the colour coding got a bit screwed up, about where BIM is successful for me. And certainly in the planning and construction phases, I think there's a good bit of success in some areas, but there's some horrific failures, unfortunately, and it's costing a fortune, and I'm wondering where the value is going sometimes. Obviously, there's an awful lot, a huge amount of detail and pretty pictures that we can put up here, and if you're tired of pretty pictures, you're going to get even worse. However, where's the value going to come? And I'm going to put up the first challenge of near zero energy buildings. The business school was an NZ building. So this is a 60% dip on the energy performance, both thermal, electric, and other carbon impact of buildings built in 2008 is now an NZ standard. And we have to reach this by law. And I'm much more interested in BIM making some contributions in this field than I would be in other areas, because I think there's been some efficiencies already brought to bear with database and object linking and embedding of databases over the past. So the mechanical and electric, although this picture, as shiny as it is, looks more like a workshop floor in American Chopper. It is an awful lot of pipes and wires. Making sure things don't bang into each other is a huge part of BIM. Great. But when you have to switch off the clash detection because it can't understand the physics that I understand on site, it gets flaky. The examples we would have is a 2-inch pipe that's an inch away from a wall. Every man, woman and child knows you can stuff a piece of insulation in behind it, but BIM can't figure that out because it believes you can't squish stuff. Breaks the laws of physics, 500 clashes appear from floor to ceiling. We start switching clash detection off. These type of things start to get very difficult on site when somebody forgets to switch it back on again. So these are practical outputs that are affecting us at a higher level, especially when it comes time for claims management. I appreciate the commercial package on the business school is now shut, and that Radigans are in the audience. So I'm going to also say that the final account is agreed. Celine, don't forget that, please. But we have had an awful lot of money spent on this project, I think because of BIM, and not saved because of it, unfortunately. I'll come to that again. Again, the cynicism is right the way through my presentation. More M&E stuff, and complicated stuff from BIM as well. All very helpful. Contractors' perspective. Now, I think the contractors have this nailed, right? It's excellent for them in terms of organizational, site management, BIM, whatever level you want to take it to. How even it manages loads and unloads from the road, busy road as it was on Pierce Street. I think the contractors have this licked, and it doesn't concern me, but I am always very aware when a contractor really jumps on a piece of technology and how it will benefit the client at the end of the day. However, an area that was interesting for us was progress and site work, and I know Radicals are very good at this. Whenever I asked for a progress pack, I got back, instead of getting a book of A3 general arrangement drawings or a pair of 3D goggles, I didn't mind which, I got back loads of blank pieces of paper where the Kobe data drop hadn't occurred on time. And this gets very difficult when you're trying to run an €80 million job. Again, the contractor's perspective in coordination, I think worked very well, and compliments as well to Mick and Niall Stone in Designer Group and to Burks, who also use this with great effect. And the computer-assisted virtual environment that Designer Group have in their office is something to behold. It's extraordinary, and it was actually genuinely very useful. When I asked the question, I put the challenge out to the group: who owns the parts of BIM? Whenever we ran aground with it and we found that somebody hadn't dropped something into the model, or the contractor was recording stuff on a set of paper drawings in his hut, and it wasn't being passed down to the right people, and in fact the model wasn't being used for the native entry point in BIM analysis. It was actually still going on paper first, and then it was going to another bit of paper, and then 5 people would gather these bits of paper in a meeting, and then somebody say, let's BIM it now. It was the wrong end, but that's perfectly natural. This is happening in the rain, by the way. So it's perfectly natural that this is the order of things, but who owns the sections of those BIM model components, and who owns it overall? So aware that I am, I've only got a few minutes left. I wanted to start talking about the pros and cons. I think I'm probably going to hear today that clients don't know what they want. And there's a load of clients in the audience. And I would put it to this room that we know exactly what we want. And we also know exactly what we want out of BIM. And before BIM, we knew exactly what we wanted out of integrated workplace management systems. And before those, we knew exactly what we wanted out of computer-assisted facilities management systems. But when the snake oil salespeople turned up at the door, selling BIM this, glue that, Revit this, Collaborator that, a doodle, a doddle, buzzsaw, my eyes don't have to glaze over. I have to try and see around them to see where the real value is. So where does the money go? So we probably spent around €2.5 million on the BIM model. That was an estimate that Turner Townsend did for us on the business school. And I am still struggling to tell our provost that we got €2 to €2.5 million worth of value out of that in the project. I'd like somebody to show it to me, because if it's embedded in the nails and the screws that I handed over to my Stollert head of facilities and services, who's now stripping the model back with an and to something that is simple, so it can be used in plumbing and electrical work and asset management and connected real estate management, then I'd love to find out where the millions went. Consultants cost more on the project because they asked for more because the BIM was complicated. I found an irony in that. The irony wasn't lost on me. And it all comes down to operations and how we coordinate the model in the end. But I do believe that the naming convention in BIM, there was Peter's in the audience somewhere, helped me greatly at the start of the project in developing an employer's information requirement document, which had highlighted to me at the time that I needed to wait to see how we resource it in the office, but also that naming conventions and documentation coordination is critically important. So this diagram on the right unfortunately got screwed up in translation onto the colours. But where do we think it might be working? The model on the left isn't a general success model for projects, is that the teams deliver models, the teams deliver buildings. It's not, gravity is probably my only real cruel moment of like something, like just put one brick on top of another, that's all I do every day. But on the right hand side, the user brief and the operations section are red for me. This is a green, amber, red diagram in the original one I had. So I believe the user brief, the most important part, I think BIM is not succeeding from my office's perspective in helping users articulate what they want from assets. I think planning and design and construction are green in the model I had. I believe that it is, certainly there is plenty of capacity for BIM to do an awful lot more heavy lifting there. And in terms of installation, or operation and performance qualification of equipment, controls, and hard and soft facilities management, that's amber for me at the moment. I think the equipment coordination is getting better. Still seeing errors. Only yesterday I was just talking to Land about it. A project which shall remain nameless. There were 250 repetitive, expensive components in this building. They had to be sized. We saw the control sample. We made observations on the control sample. Those observations were marked up onto a set of master drawings. They didn't get translated into BIM. They were all made in Russia to the previous design. They all arrived on site wrong. They're all being sent back. So BIM failed us there in this particular installation. On the operation 24/7 of a project, and it is the biggest circle and it is red for me in here, 5% of the project value goes into the built environment at the start. Your construction fees, your demolition, your design team fees to wine and cheese section, that bit, that's about 5%. The cradle to grave, the other 95%, is where the real money goes. And I'm finding it really difficult to take this half a terabyte of data and convert it into something useful. As the plumbing supervisor in our office, who's not also a Luddite, he looked at this fancy laptop and Celine came in and presented to say, this is what Radigans will be giving you in the end. He said, that's wonderful. Can I laminate it and stick it to the border house wall? Because at the moment, it's not as useful as you think it might be. So I think the operation, people are being let down by BIM at the moment, and I'd like to challenge this room to do something about it, if you don't mind. And I think that's where the real value of the 2.5 million can, on the business school can come out of. So no pressure now to convert that. Can BIM help? Well, I think the next phase of NZ, the next phase of our energy management, we're all beholden to do something about the environment. We don't have to lecture people on the environment anymore. I'm being lectured by teenagers on the environment, and I'm embarrassed about it, and we need to do something about it. My daughter is the best lecturer in environmental. I bring her into the E3 project in a heartbeat, because she can tell me exactly what she wants out of the world when I'm finished wrecking it. So these graphs are thankfully beginning to go the right direction. The first dotted purple graph, very difficult to read the slide, I apologise, maybe that's intentional from my perspective, but that's where it would have gone if we hadn't brought NZ in. Greenhouse gases are on the shift down, thankfully, in the built environment. We have a dotted section now by 2020 to get through if we get our targets by 33%. And then the green will continue to 2030 and then to zero greenhouse gases by 2050. Now, if BIM is really going to make an impact in my professional perspective, it makes it here. And the operations of the buildings, the coordination of the built environment at the end of the building process is where the real value can be hit. Environmentally, societally, financially. So, yes, focus on where the pipes and wires go during the building process. But you know what? To be honest, if you said to me tomorrow, BIM's broken, it's not available to do the next building, we'd move on. It'll be fine. We've done it before. We'd have one brick on top of another. That's what I tell them. But when it's out the tail end, we need a database. Whether we write it down, we record it in Excel, we have a CAFM system or an integrated workplace management system or a digital twin, that's where the asset value begins to pile up. So the best part of my presentation is the end, because I'd like to introduce Roger as the real expert in the field. I just sign checks, really. So Roger's just the brains and an and follow as well. Thank you very much.
Well, good morning, everybody. I'm very sorry I'm not going first. It's very difficult to follow that. And I'd like to thank Greg for his frankness. I'm an academic, and I do research into this particular area, and it's incredibly valuable for me and the people that I work with on research to have access to people like Greg with their expertise and their frankness to realise what the real problems are on the ground. So it's been very enlightening to see this. I want also to talk about the business school, because we're working with that, because we're here to talk about digital twins, and you can't get a digital twin unless you deal with the types of problems that Greg has been talking about, and hopefully, and I know Anand is going to talk about it as well. Digital twins are not new. We've been using them for a very long time. So for example, another area I work in is in concrete. And we've been using digital twins for concrete for many years, in which you have a production process. And I know that Bill is going to be speaking about this, about production at a later stage. But in effect, you have something which is digital, it's got sensors, it's taking in information, it's making decisions, and the consequence of those decisions is some production process changes in order to deal with the problem. So for me, that's a type of digital twin, and different people have different opinions of digital twins. You can't have a dynamic digital twin, which is what everybody's talking about, I think. If you look at the BIM gathering last week, there was a lot of talk about that, unless you've got a static digital twin. And that means that you've got to get the various parties together to produce something which is useful. So I'm not going to go through this slide and all the various things, but I want to illustrate that there's a concept phase which very much involves the client, the design phase involves the consultants, and the construction phase is obviously who that involves. But at each stage of each one of those, there are difficulties that need to be met in order to end up with something that can be handed over to Greg at the end of the project that he can actually use. And this is where I think academics can work together in partnership with the estates. It's very valuable for us to get access to real data. So from the client's perspective, we were hearing about early contractor involvement. I think it should be early client involvement, because certainly the client's involved in the IOR. But the difficulty is evaluating what the client actually needs for the 95% of the structure's life. And that needs to be discovered early on, and it needs to be at the forefront of the mind of the designers and the contractors as well. That it's not just so that they can make efficiencies. Yeah, it's very important that the client who's spending €2.5 million in the business school on BIM, and then finds that they don't have something they can use for 95% of their life. And on a campus like Trinity, where there's so many buildings and so many opportunities, to tie all those together, very much as Alexander was mentioning earlier, tie all the various bits of the campus together into one digital model, which is all on the same platform so that you can extract the information, would be enormously efficient and beneficial for us to be able to do. So I think not just involving FM, but just get the client to sit down with the various people involved with some help to evaluate exactly what needs to be done. And I think it's pretty obvious, the very last point there is that the client, in this particular case, Trinity, doesn't always see a realization of the theoretical benefits, which everybody is saying that these savings are there to be made, not necessarily for the client. From a consultant's perspective, I might look at things slightly differently, and I'm not specifically talking about the business school here, but part of the problem is that when you have, as we do have in the public sector, competing for fees, first of all, so we have to appoint each one of the consultants separately, and then you put them together, and when you put them together, they have to work with each other in a collaborative way if they're using BIM models. And part of the problem is that if you've got a minimum or a most efficient and advantageous tendering process, what happens is that the consultants want to do as we've always wanted to do, because I worked as a consultant at one stage early in my career, is that you want to do design once and once only, please. Yeah? And you always have these little changes that have to take place, but you don't want to have to redo the designs. And the problem is that, computers are very unforgiving. That if we sit around a table and we agree on something, we can do that from a humanitarian viewpoint. But the computer is absolutely clear. What is being decided by whom? Who has changed what? What has been the influence of that change on other people? And therefore, if I'm coming at minimum price and I wasn't being paid to design it 3 times, who's going to pay me for designing it twice more? These are important questions that need to be grappled with so that we're more efficient. And BIM is supposed to make it more efficient. You do your design up front. Yeah, and we have all been brought on doing the design at the end. The last possible moment. You go to a site meeting, you're told you need the reinforcing drawings next week. So you actually detail it, because it's expensive to detail it. Whereas now we have to do all of that up front, and then changes take place. That causes problems. So from a sorry, that should be, I beg your pardon, that should be a contractor's, my apologies, it should be the contractor's perspective. So from a contractor's perspective, I don't think I need to say very much. I think Greg has said enough. And that is, I think if you look back at one of my earlier slides as to what a contractor might want to use BIM for, and indeed if they get a BIM model they can't use, they'll convert it into something they can use it for, I think there's value there for the contractor. I think, it won't be hard to actually demonstrate that. So when a contractor says, as the client says, as the consultant says, where's the value for me in this? Yeah, where's the profit? Why would I do it? Is I think the contractors have an advantage insofar as there are clear advantages to them. That may be a discussion for another day. So the point I'm making is that unless you get a static digital twin, which is then handed over to become a dynamic one, and what we mean by that is that you start seeing how a building performs. You start gaining that data, and you start doing modelling or continuing with your modelling to calibrate your model, to verify your model, and then to do simulations on things that don't work, and as a consequence then to change what is actually happening in the building. That's where the dynamic digital twin comes in. And that can't happen unless you have a good static one. So again, I'm not going to go through all of these points here, but what we can do in Trinity with the digital twin that we have and with the building management system is we know what space utilization is very important for us. We want to have as many students in as many rooms as often as possible. We want to have as many staff occupying room as often as possible, so we get really high utilization of space. Even if it means sharing space and moving space and changing space as adaptable space. And therefore we need to be able to monitor the environments within the space, the efficiency of the building, and indeed whether or not people are actually using the building in the way in which it was designed. So therefore we get all this BMS data. So we're very fortunate. We in civil engineering, we very kindly get access every week to download all the BMS data, which is absolutely massive for the building, as you can imagine. So we're getting all kinds of temperatures, how a pump is working, the amount of energy that we're using, the CO2 in a lecture theatre after 4 hours with 350 people in the room. That's the CO2 level. People are starting to get sleepy. Is the temperature very uncomfortable? Yeah. Humidity as well. We don't want any problems with humidity. So we get all this data in. And what we do is we take the digital model, which we've been given, and in all its massiveness, 0.5 terabyte, it's an enormous amount of data, which probably only 5% is useful. And we convert that then into what I, as a structural engineer, do. And that is that I take the BIM model and I put it into an expert system, such as IES, which does building energy modeling. And it does the modeling of the air movements and the moisture and the CO2 in the building. And we can see how the building is performing. So we have the sensor data from the BMS telling us what's actually happening. And then we have this model with all these assumptions as to how it was going to behave, and it doesn't behave like that at all. So how can we improve our models to take account of occupant behavior? Because we can get the physics right, yeah, we can get the thermodynamics right, but the problem is very hard to get occupant behavior right. So we're trying to change the software suppliers, to get them to get the modeling that right, so that we can take account of the fact that some cyclist comes in and opens the window because they're warm and leaves the window all open all day till they're leaving in the evening, even though they're not in the room. How do you model that? How do you prevent it? How do you control it? And these are all important because this is an A-rated building. We spent a lot of money to make this highly thermally efficient, and what we end up with is an environment which is not good. CO2 levels are high. Yeah. Moisture levels are high. The temperatures can be too high. Yeah. In which case we're using HVAC to bring the temperature down while the heating's still on. It's a classic problem in shopping malls. Absolutely classic problem. Yeah. Getting a resolution to that. So we can help. So what we've done is, and I'm an academic, so I don't necessarily trust something that somebody gives me, so we put in our own monitoring. So we pick the various spaces, the big lecture theatres, the small lecture theatres, the PhD rooms, where I'm not sure all PhD students are there all day, but they're certainly heavily occupied. Yeah? So we know those are heavy rooms for temperature control, people do strange things, and so on. And we have our own low-frequency system, which delivers data to a gateway, and then we upload that through the cloud, we upload that and put it straight into our model, and we then complement that data that's coming in, telling us what's going on, to inform our model, which is being formed using BIM. This, I have to say, is not for the business school, in case you think it is. It's actually for another project. We have a Sustainable Energy Ireland project in which we're looking at 100 houses. We're looking at 24 different commercial properties, including the business school. And we have our own sensors in each one of those buildings. And we're getting CO2, humidity, light, people moving, and temperature. 5 things in that one little device, which is mobile, it's wireless, and it sends data straight into my office. So this is the type of data which I'm getting on relative humidity, so I can spot where the difficulties are if you're getting 95% humidity in a room, that's a problem. CO2 monitoring in lecture theatres, again. And in schools, you think of a school. So you're in a school, you've got high temperatures, you've got high CO2 after a morning, and kids are getting sleepy. That's not a good environment. So again, we can model that, and we have models of that. We can model that, and we can say, what's the solution to this particular problem? We can identify the exceedances so we can take action. So here's temperature exceedances. You'll see the ones that are in yellow there. So you can see that action was taken at a particular point here because obviously the temperatures were too high. Same for CO2. We see the CO2 coming in, getting up to very high parts per million. And again, we have to intervene because something's wrong with the HVAC system, or people don't realize it if there isn't one. And therefore, we have to bring the CO2 levels down within the space. And you know, part of this process is feedback, which is very important. What happens is that, okay, we take our BIM, we put it into our expert system, we develop our model, which is our digital twin. Our digital twin is in the BIM model. That's where our digital twin is. We can simulate it, we can model it. It's validated by the data. The data validates the model, so we know we're getting accurate results. But most important then is, our intention is, with the dozen schools we're working with, is we're going to put a little device like the one on the right. Now, we got permission to do this from the schools. And what we do is we simply put a little pad on the wall. And it's green when everything's fine. And they get informed as to what the temperature and the CO2 is in the room. And when it gets to the point that the temperature is too high or the CO2 is too high, it goes orange. And when it gets very high, where they really need to take some action, it goes red. So the kids in the room tell the teacher that the little pad on the wall, and we've given the little person a name, and he moves around, yeah, it catches their attention, it's gone red, we need to do something about it. And then we reward the classroom for the classrooms that's fastest to react to the environment. So that you create an environment in which people are reactive. Because we don't know about CO2, we know about temperature, we have no idea about CO2. Nobody can tell me what the CO2 or humidity is in this room, it's invisible. Temperature, we know we're uncomfortable. Humidity, it doesn't matter in Ireland. It matters in Singapore, but it doesn't matter here. So you'll see the importance of a digital twin is not only modeling and simulating and making predictions as to how changes can take place, but then feeding back to the client so they can actually physically use it. And that, I think, is where an app comes in. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. That was a great setting for me to continue on. So I'm going to spend the next 10 to 15 minutes to talk about how do we build a digital twin? What's the process around integrating with the BIM process during the design construction phase, and how do we take it to operations? The first step is to create a solid information strategy. And this is most often ignored. We see many projects where the client expectations may be Kobe on everything. That's not a very good situation, because when we get a lot of information, then we can't see the wood from the trees, right? So there's going to be a huge amount of information where we lose sight of what really matters. Knowing what we need is driven by the end outcomes. What are we going to use this for? Is it about maintenance? Is it about optimizing performance? Is it about sustainability? Is it about circularity? And knowing those goals will then drive specific information requirements that we need to specify. Typically, it could be starting with what assets or what building elements do we need to care about. And the building elements may be maintainable equipment, or it could be managed spaces. What are they? What information do we need about them? Who produces that information? At what stage in the project is that information produced? How do we collect it? How do we validate it? And how do we bring it together in an information model? So this is basic discovery of information requirements to drive a digital twin strategy. And if this is done well, then we set the stage for successful outcomes. So typically, this is where we start, and that's what we did with Trinity College as well. And once that's done, we then look at how do we bring this together in the project phase. A project twin has many manifestations. A project twin could be about production of coordinated drawings for construction, and that may be driven out of a Revit model, coordinated with Navisworks or whatever. And that may be just what a project twin needs to do by default to drive the construction process. It may be about driving an estimation system. It may be about driving a scheduling system and being able to visualize progress of work visually. Now, all of those manifestations of a project twin is in the hands of several stakeholders. Who drives the schedule? Who drives the estimations? Probably the contractor. Now, in this project, our scope was about focusing on creating a project twin that delivers an asset twin. So my presentation is more in that context. So the project twin has to establish two pieces of information very critically. What is it in the model? What are the stuff that we care about? The managed spaces and the maintainable assets, what are they? And where are they? Just having these two pieces of information makes it very easy for the rest of the information to be hooked off that. It may sound trivial, but believe me, when you get a BIM model and try to search for something, and good luck, you probably will not find what you're looking to find because the models are not classified. The elements that are in the model may not know which system they are part of. What are their connections? What are their upstream and downstream impacted elements? So there's a lot of information that needs to be provided just from knowing what is in the model and where is it in the model. And the project twin helps us to make that become real. Now, as we all know, information matures over time. Not all of the information is known when a designer is producing the early designs or even the detailed designs. But we would know what is it and where is it. We would know the performance specifications. But when the contractor makes choices on the equipment is when we know what's the manufacturer, the model, and the specific performance criteria about that asset. And during commissioning, there's a whole bunch of information produced. The reason I would like to bring this, present this slide, I wanted to present this slide, was we always talk about LOD as in maturing geometry over time. We are not generally conscious about maturing information over time. And the challenge is in doing that. Because it's not just the designers. It's also the main contractor, the subcontractor, the specialist contractor, the commissioning agent. Information is produced by different stakeholders in the process. And not all of them are going to be sitting and working inside of Revit. Because as you know, if you issue a Revit model to somebody, there is no access control or permission or anybody can change anything. So how do we make sure that the information that's produced by different stakeholders come together in a meaningful way without compromising the integrity of the model? Now, there are two sets of workflows that we've employed on the project. One set of workflows is around model-based data. So the information that can be stored and delivered within a Revit model, for example. There are many technical challenges that we need to be aware of. We are involved in an airport project now where there are 8 million pieces of data specified by the project. When we got involved, 8 million pieces of data was the count. Number of assets that the client cared about, the number of instances of those assets, and I think 160 parameters, many of them duplicates, are all specified. Now, can you imagine what it costs to produce this information? And how is this going to be ever meaningfully used? So that apart, that model, the project is not complete, it's still in early construction. It takes about 45 minutes for that model to open in a supersized desktop. Supersized. Because every piece of data that we add into a model creates an additional overhead in terms of compute power required to process that model. Now, it's therefore really important to have the model-based workflows defined around the minimum data sets that we need to have from the model, which is what we discussed earlier, which is what is it and where is it. Once we have that, we can then collect information relating to those assets during the normal progression of the construction process from the right stakeholders. It could be delivered through custom web forms. I'm commissioning a piece of equipment, I scan a RFID device or a QR code, a form pops up and I enter the values and that data goes and links back to the model element. I could be collecting type level information. Every piece of pump, every instance of a pump of the same make and model has the same 8 or 10 parameters that the maintenance teams want. Why should that be necessarily put into the model? It can come through a simple data template, captured, transformed, connected back to the model. So there are a set of workflows that can be employed to streamline the process of information management. There are some data that's model-based and some data that's not model-based. And a lot of the information is also in documents. We cannot ignore the fact that there are manuals and troubleshooting guides and inspection reports and quality reports and whatever. There's several warranty documents. There's several documents that get delivered. How do these documents get related back to the elements in the model? Many times you may have observed that the document is stored in a Z drive, in a folder structure, a directory structure with a number of folders, and a URL is inserted into the model, so like a web link. You click on it and it takes you to the document. They very easily break. You update the document, or you change the location of the document, that link doesn't work anymore. So there has to be a system by which all of this information actually comes together and is able to maintain itself and progressively get updated and managed. So the asset twin is an outcome of a set of workflows which starts from defining the information strategy. What do we care about? Where is it? What is it? Who delivers the information that we care about? How is it collected? And that process goes through a model-based data deliverable and a non-model-based deliverable. And they all get integrated and to produce the asset twin. So that's the workflow that was used to create the asset twin on the project. So the asset twin then effectively represents the building, the virtual building, the models, the plans, the documents, and all of the data. And that sets the foundation, to Roger's point earlier, to start connecting information about how the building is performing. Because once we have a structured data model that represents everything, we can start connecting that to actual performance metrics that we care about. So the performance twin is really about, it's not about replacing expert systems. I think this is an important consideration to have. There is a view that a digital twin should be something which does all of the things that operates and manages the building. Space management, maintenance management, energy analysis. No. The expert systems represent certain specific functions which they will continue to do. What the digital twin strategy should demand is that these should be networkable. A network of systems that brings together meaningful information and provides a combinatorial value. I don't know if this is a word in English language, but the combination of information when presented meaningfully to the user, so they have data to drive decisions. That's really the goal that we are working towards on this project. So some of the screenshots that Roger showed you earlier, the information about the occupancy, the temperature, or the CO2 levels, the system, the operator, somebody in the estates and facilities team, doesn't have to look at every single piece of data. They just have to look at exceptions, and they have to see it in the context of the building. A sensor value with a certain code doesn't really mean much. But if I can see that, the air quality in this room is not an acceptable level, and by the way, preventive maintenance on some of these equipment associated with the systems that feed that room has not been done. The service history shows me that I have all of these equipment that have actually broken down multiple times. And I have a cost data that tells me the life cycle cost I have incurred on that piece of asset. Now it tells the maintenance person, or gives the maintenance person an insight to say, I'm getting continuous problems with air quality or with temperature. And I can see that this piece of equipment has been costing me time, and it is money, and it's been breaking down. Should I stop repairing it? And probably I should replace it. Right? So the ability to get these insights come from the combinatorial value of bringing information together from different workflows, different systems, and presenting it in a meaningful way. And this requires some thinking through to make sure that we are not simply presenting everything that's happening onto a screen, but just bringing what matters on a single pane of glass and making it possible for people to make decisions based on data. And when you get to that point, that sets the stage for digital transformation. So as a university with several buildings, the vision would be, how do I benchmark performance of building A versus building B? I can make now decisions about selection of equipment. A lot of insights start coming together when we have structured information and we have a system to look at every building in a similar way, when we can compare apples to apples. Otherwise, when you don't have structured information, we have a lot of data, that doesn't give us any meaningful insight. So we are on this journey. We are there right up to the level of an asset twin at this point. The digital twin, the expert systems that come together, the digital twin are already there. Now, the next step would be to bring them together and start presenting them in a meaningful way on a single pane of glass, as I mentioned earlier. With that, thank you.
Thanks to our three speakers. I think we'll have an interesting Q&A session when all this is over, or when the next two talks are over. Our next speaker is Dr. Bill O'Leary, who also has an MBA. Bill is currently the General Manager of Confirm, which is an SFI-funded smart manufacturing research centre focused on robotics, machine learning, advanced modelling, supply chain optimisation, etc. And he's a wide industry background in mining, in renewables, tech, etc. So I'll hand over to you, Bill.
Good morning, everybody. So my name is Bill O'Leary. I'm the General Manager with Confirm, the new Smart Manufacturing Research Centre with SFI, Science Foundation Ireland. Delighted to be here. So I hope I can give you a different perspective of it today. So when I walked into the room this morning, I felt like I'd walked into the wrong location. And I'm coming from a manufacturing background, obviously, but I think there's real synergies here and real opportunities for me to share what we've learned, I suppose, in the last 18 months of our existence, and maybe to coalesce some of that with a lot of what you're doing from a digital twin perspective. So I'm firstly going to talk a little bit about who we are, what we do, and how we do it. The why is very important as well. So why do we do it? Why do we look at digital twins as part of our research portfolio? Why is it important? And why are manufacturing companies looking at it? Then I'll talk briefly about standards, a little bit following on from a recent presentation I made at NSAI, the National Standards Authority of Ireland, where I look at why standards in this nascent area are very, very important and why companies are looking at it. And thirdly, then I'll go a little bit deeper into digital twin technology and where we're at in the manufacturing landscape. So who are we and what do we do? Well, fundamentally, our principal tenet is to, I suppose, transform the Irish manufacturing sector, and it's a very lofty ambition. Okay, so we're there ultimately to improve the capability of Irish manufacturing and digitise industry, digitise manufacturing from cradle to grave. So everything from blockchain at the front end in terms of capturing information, decomplexing, securitizing information, decomplexing your supply chain, simplifying it, using advanced analytics to better control what is for most companies the biggest, maybe biggest cost in terms of working capital. So equipment or material that is sitting there not being used. So using advanced analytics in that space, right through to digital twin, to IoT, to sensorization, and smart products. So quite a lofty ambition, but that's only on the digital side, that's only on the tech side. Adjacent to that then, and part of that offering, we're there to, I suppose, improve the capability, and that's what is on the discussion, or the mention earlier that Alexandra made about skills, and I suppose developing a skill set within Ireland Inc. around digital manufacturing, in my opinion, where we're quite weak currently. So that's a big area for us. And then the other really important area is to develop standards and associated business models, because there's no doubt that manufacturing is being massively disrupted right now. So we have to help companies, I suppose, realign their business models, and I've got a couple of examples of that which I'll touch on later. So who are we? So we're centred in the University of Limerick. We're part of a 9-institution cohort. So we have competency in AIT at London Institute of Technology around virtual reality, augmented reality. We have competency in the University of Limerick around artificial intelligence. We have competency in NUIG around predictive modelling, advanced analytics. Competency in Tyndall and Cork around sensors and the development of sensors. smart sensors. UCC, we've got the likes of Barry O'Sullivan, who's one of our academics who sits on he's the chair of the expert working group for artificial intelligence and the European Commission. So he's looking at the whole ethics and side of the deployment of AI. So we're a 25 million funded centre. So we got 25 million euros from SFI. We've married that with about 22 million from industry. And that money is there to, I suppose, to structure our research and to structure our operations. Our research is done in two ways, which I'll come to in a minute. We have 39 investigators, and they're a mix of principal investigators and funded investigators, academics all within this space. We have nine institutions, which I've mentioned there. We have 100 industry partners, or 100 industry stakeholders right now, through many sectors, through food and beverage, through pharmaceuticals, through medtech, and all different sizes, multinationals, SMEs, startups, the whole lot. We have 14 industry projects so far. Most of those are focused on, I suppose, better use of predictive modelling, the better use of data to produce products quicker, better, faster, cheaper, more robustly. We're partnered with 8 national research technology centres. So they're not necessarily SFI, Science Foundation Ireland research centres. They're centres that are come under the gambit of IDA or Enterprise Ireland. And we work with centres in pharmaceutical, we work with centres in dairy. We have 16 international collaborators, and that's a very important consideration because what you saw some of the great work that they're doing on the government and national level in the UK with Alexandra. We suffer a little bit from that. I would say we're not as holistic in terms of our approach right now. We have a lot of learnings to do, but how we can improve that quickly and robustly, I think, is by benchmarking ourselves continuously. So we're doing that on a national level with the likes of MIT, with the likes of A-Star in Singapore, with the likes of Maine in Denmark, and the Institute for Manufacturing in Cambridge in the UK. We're moving into a new facility, and it's dwarfed. I know some of the numbers we mentioned earlier in terms of capital expenditure, but this number is quite low. But we've got a commitment from UL, the University of Limerick, to retrofit a facility just off the Goody Road roundabout. I don't know if you know it, but alongside the Travelodge Hotel. We're moving in there to a 1,600 square metre facility in the next 3 months. And I'll touch a bit on that in a minute. So our 3 objectives, you've understood a little bit about why we exist. You understood a little bit about how we're structured. Now I'm just going to talk about the 3 areas of focus for us. So fundamentally, we're a research centre. So we have to do scientifically robust, excellent research. We have to make a difference on top of that to industry in terms of competitiveness and cost and safety and quality and all of the standard metrics that industry are faced with in the manufacturing space. We also, it's very, very important for us to develop a cohort and to help companies succession plan in this space. So help them deliver, I suppose, training programs through the traditional method, which I'll come to in a minute, but also maybe through more bespoke methods, which increasingly we need to do. We have to engage the public. It's very important that we inform the public about what we're doing and how we're spending their money, because ultimately it's taxpayers' money. And then we're focused very much on the principle of creating a community of practice. And that's something which industry loves. So, and I think we're very good at that in Ireland, and it's something we really need to exploit more and more. This, I suppose, openness and willingness to share information cross-sectorally and at different sizes of companies. We're very, very, I'm seeing it day to day, the large multinational is prepared to share information with the small SME in a different sector to the benefit of both ultimately. And I think that's a unique selling point that we have in Ireland, and we need to exploit it more. But that community of practice, in essence, is a structure where we're centred at PowerPoint, but we're sharing information, we're allowing companies to showcase what they've done in terms of research and technology and where they're at for shared learning. How are we structured? So I mentioned earlier about the focus on smart products, smart machines, and so on. The way we're structured at the moment is quite similar to a lot of the other Science Foundation Ireland centres. So in the middle, you've got the fundamentally very, very core research. That's low technology readiness level. So what that means is it's very, very fundamental. It might never be applied. And that's focused on things like virtual industrialization, cyber-physical systems, and self-aware manufacturing systems. That all seems like a bit of a mouthful, but in essence it's using data to build better predictive models. Cyber-physical systems. What is a cyber-physical system? Really, a cyber-physical system is a digital twin. And then you're looking at self-aware manufacturing systems, and that feeds into this whole, I suppose, focus increasingly on universal machine, batch of one, more bespoke manufacture. You're seeing general public out there are looking for more bespoke, more differentiated products, and we're seeing the customer is much more centrally located right through the whole manufacturing landscape, and that's not going to change. In fact, that's going to increase. So that self-aware manufacturing systems is building in, I suppose, a degree of flexibility, moving away from your traditional assembly line into much more cellular, more flexible, highly quite agile, highly bespoke manufacturing landscape. So that's our fundamental research, and then on the outer circle you have our targeted research, which is where industry come in. So typically industry would come in, we would leverage some of their investment, they would buy expertise typically, and industry are looking always at what can Ireland and what can firms specifically give us in terms of competency that I can't get in the US, or I can't get in the UK, or I can't get in Asia. So that question can be answered by us, but it can be better answered by what I touched on earlier, that whole idea of companies prepared to share information and build a a threshold of competency. And that's very important. So the Ireland Inc. factor here is something that we need to very much keep front and centre in our progress. Smart products. What is a smart product? Well, a smart product in essence is a sensor product where you're capturing information from it as it's being used in the field, the customer is using it. And you're then using that information to drive some of your new product development at the front end. A smart machine is again a sensorized machine. It's building cognition and control and awareness into your machine to respond to non-conformance, to detect anomalies much more earlier on in the process and save on cost, quality, times, and so on. Smart production systems is what I touched on earlier, that whole principle of building flexibility and agility into your production assembly. Smart supply chains, that again is sensorizing a lot of your materials, capturing information right through the life cycle, how is it behaving, who's responsible for it if it becomes non-conforming, if it arrives wet or it arrives out of conformance. Capturing that information through the whole transport and warehousing system, and then building in better predictive modelling for control of working capital. So where did those two collide? So I touched on the fundamental and the applied. Where did they collide? Where did they coalesce? Well, they coalesce. If you could see on the columns, you see our hub research, and on the rows you see our targeted research. And they coalesce in a number of projects, and these are some of the active projects that we have at the moment. So smart products, full traceability of your materials, better product and machine communication through the use of sensors and IoT, cobots, even though there's real challenges with cobots out there, I would say, in terms of their deployment, algorithms for intelligent machines, and building cognition into equipment. VR, virtual reality for training and putting yourself, simulating particular environments. Companies are using that a lot to see how you would respond to a particular environment from a safety perspective or a productivity perspective. So there are some of the examples of some of the projects we've done so far. Education, public engagement. So that's the research side. The second objective is to build or to drive talent and education. So what are we doing in terms of talent? We're working with second level and third level institutions to train and do a lot of work placement and bursary schemes with people. We're going into the schools, we're doing workshops, we're doing training courses with those guys, and we're building capability. What are we doing with the public in general? Well, we're informing them, we're having workshops, we're having open days, and that's an increasing focus for us. We're doing an awful lot of social media as well. And then as well, we're trying to bring a lot of this arts, this whole thinking of arts and the softer skills into science, technology, engineering, and manufacturing, into that whole STEM space. And that's a really interesting area for us. We're doing a lot of public events, informal discussions, and then what are we doing in terms of capacity building? So that's really where the whole succession planning and training comes in. and we're doing a lot of work with teachers on the CPD side. We're doing, we've recently started the Marie Curie fellowship program, European fellowship program. 16 fellows working in the area of AI deployed throughout our cohort. Just some pictures here. You can see in the top right, that was a digital twin workshop that we had in Thomond Park back in November. So we had 100 industry partners at that, and then we had a panel discussion. So we had a mix there, I suppose, of academics, industry, service providers, technologists, and so on. That was really interesting. At the bottom there, you can see some activity we're doing with kiddies and second level, third level. So what are we doing in terms of training? Right now, we're taking advantage of the fact that we have 9 institutions, and we're taking advantage of the fact that that each of them have a skill set that is kind of unique, and we're developing or we're deploying our training around that. So we're doing an engine mechatronics in UL, we're doing an AI in UL in CIP, but that's only part of the solution, and in my mind that won't solve all of our problems. These are again a traditional answer to a non-traditional need. So we have to, I suppose, reconfigure a lot of this and deliver as a nation a much more bespoke and comprehensive suite of training. Companies out there are not necessarily looking for a 4-year degree course because their internal cohort don't need that. What they do need, that's only part of the solution. What they need is more agile, more bespoke, remote training courses that are much shorter over a much shorter time span. And that's where Ireland Inc. at the moment is falling down. We're not very well positioned in that space at the moment. So increasingly we'll be doing work with the likes of Skillnet, and we'll be doing a lot of work with the department. Debbie, the Department of Enterprise Business and Innovation, will be helping us with that. But we're only part of the solution, really. So I touched on structure, I touched on research, I touched on the education public engagement. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the community practice. So it's very much a centred, open door policy. People can come and go, industry will rent space, we do a lot of targeted projects with industry there, we'll be doing a lot of our fundamental research there. It's centred at PowerPoint, as I said, it's a dedicated facility, and it'll be an ecosystem. It'll really be, I suppose, the manifestation of our community practice, and it'll be the centre point of that. And so multinationals, venture capitalists, startups, training agencies, NSAI, regulators, all of these will have a space in this ecosystem. So really, really exciting. Bear in mind for a minute though that we're not, when I talked earlier about the research, we're not as a research centre at the really top end. So when you look at the whole cradle to grave of product development and research, the scale that typically is used is technology readiness level. We're at the lower end of that. So we're more fundamental in some aspects of applied, but not really at the top end, which is where the prototyping comes in. Prototyping and then the deployment and commercialization comes in. But that feeds into the mention earlier I made about the fact that we need a holistic approach here. That's not only on the training side, but also on the agency side. So we have the IDA, which is hoping to develop a new facility in Limerick, the Advanced Manufacturing Centre. That will be much more higher PRL, and there'll be a logical synergy between us and them. So we'll work at the lower PRL stuff and hand over to these guys. But ultimately, we're positioning ourselves as a country to better, I suppose, attract foreign direct investment with that holistic offering. What are our growth projections? So if you look at the moment, we have we're planning to have by mid of next year 163 people in total. Right now, I would say we have our annual conference in 2 weeks' time. That's about 100 people, a mix of academics and researchers. So our growth projections are pretty aggressive. We're hoping to be by mid 2025 to be at 350 people, and most of that is through industry targeted research growth. So you can see it at the second last line there. You can see that our SFI funded spoke researchers is going to increase from currently about 60 up to about 131. But that's all uncertain at the moment. I mean, we'll ultimately be judged by to what extent we've made a difference for industry and to what extent we did it through the use of robust, excellent research. So standards, why are they important? I think they're very important now because this whole digital manufacturing space is very nascent, very new. It's developing very, very fast, and it's almost developing too fast. So the standards are not in place. There is, in many cases, for a lot of this technology, there isn't even a standard, or there's a defunct or an obsolete standard. So we're positioning ourselves with the likes of NSAI, and increasingly we'll be there with the FDA for the highly regulated sectors to help develop standards and to help ensure validation. I mean, ultimately, when you look at cognition and machine learning and building cognition into equipment, there's a real validation challenge there. And that's something that the regulated sectors are going to have to overcome through help with ourselves to ensure deployment. So when you look at standards, you're looking at right through that whole TRL landscape, from test and measurement, interfacing, right through to performance and product standards. So we think it's very relevant for us right now. It will differentiate us. If you look at, we've been charged as a centre to secure a lot of European funding through Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe. That's looking at competitiveness and grand challenges around the area of circular economy, digital health. We're in that space, and if you look at the success rates in that area, increasingly applications are successful if they include an aspect of standards and impact. So it's very important when we're helping companies measure ROI, or at least assess ROI or projected ROI, that we're able to, I suppose, bring a standards aspect to this. There's no point in I suppose, looking at projecting ROI and then we've got a contradiction in terms of standards, or we're not meeting the standards requirement. So they go hand in hand. And then it's timely. It's timely because we're starting early, we're new, and industry need it, and we know that they need it. So that's why we're focusing on standards. And then how do we do it? I touched earlier on our hub research. I touched earlier on our target research. So we embed it that way. We do our research with a focus on some of the applicable standards. We help companies develop standards. In the target research, we're doing it all of the time in our hub research, which is going on irrespective of our engagement with industry. We do it, as I just mentioned, as part of our application for Horizon 2020. We are very cognizant, and increasingly so, of the need to help companies and ourselves develop spin-outs in this space, and we're charged with that requirement as part of our funding. So you've seen over the years many companies use standards as a way to differentiate and as a way of tying up a marketplace and getting a run on their competition. So that's an area we're going to look at. And then this whole area of 5G. So we're developing a 5G testbed, the first manufacturing 5G testbed in the country. And again, we'll be taking a standards. We'll be taking a standards approach to that too, and developing standards in that space from an Irish perspective. So now I come to digital twin, finally. So I'll give you an idea of where we're at from a digital twin perspective. You've seen much of the commentary this morning on BIM and facilities management. I'm looking at it a little bit different in terms of the manufacturing. Digital twin, as Roger said, exists for a long time. You've got your PLCs, your SCADA, MES systems. To a certain extent, a lot of those are digital twins. You're capturing information and you're responding to it. You're capturing information on virtual platform and you're responding to it. So a digital twin, if you look at what Deloitte said here, they said it's a near-time digital image of a physical object or process which helps optimize business performance. That optimized business performance is absolutely vital. We've got to bring that into the front end. Ultimately, even though we're a research centre, all of this is driven by business need. So you've got to focus on the output and the financial benefits. Colin Paris from GE mentioned that a digital twin is a living model. I like that one. It's a living model. It's a real-life example. You're capturing live information and you're responding to it. Again, focus on a business outcome. And the last one from Gartner. And Gartner, remember, have recognised that digital twin is one of the top 10 most relevant technologies for this year. That might change next year. Let's wait and see. But for now, that's the landscape. And they've mentioned that it's a dynamic software model of a physical data system. So how does it work? So as Roger mentioned earlier, it's about having an ecosystem infrastructure there of sensors. You're capturing data from a process, from a product, from a machine. You're using that data, you're analysing that data, and then you're actuating on that data. You're responding to that data, be it in terms of changing the parameters of a particular process or a particular equipment, or looking at trends, or even calling a halt to a process. One very interesting aspect of a digital twin, and something here that we didn't touch on this morning, was this is all very good, right? It's real live information, and you're responding to non-performance, or you're trying to improve performance. And it's that coalescence of machine, people, environment, and with coalesced, I suppose, over a number of different platforms. But what's very, very interesting here is that you can use, if you use this correctly, you can use it, number one, for simulation. So you're predicting what will happen in a particular outcome if I do X to a process or X to a machine. What are the likely outcomes? That's very important. Secondarily, this whole idea of retrospective analysis. I've sent a product to a customer. It hasn't worked very well. Right now, we're looking at QC or QA data, and we're thinking, but that's not telling the full story. A digital twin will allow us to tell us the full story, because you're looking at all of the related and relevant information for a process, for a machine at a particular time and place. So that's a powerful mention. What are we doing right now from a research perspective in Limerick? You can see here we have a digital twin of our large joining suite, robotic joining suite. It's a multi-million euro investment, and we're moving that into PowerPoint. So where does digital twin fit in the landscape? It's even though it's around for a long time, it's I suppose there's a level of kind of hysteria a little bit about it, but also I suppose there's a mystique about it. People are a bit overawed by it. They think it's almost too much, and to a certain extent it is. So it's very important that we decomplex and demystify it. And so where does it fit? It fits, I suppose, there's overlap with every other aspect of a key enabling technology within the Industry 4.0 landscape. There's data implications, there's AR implications, there is cloud computing and edge computing implications. Obviously, the Internet of Things and the connectivity of equipment is very central to all of this. And system integration is very important, obviously, and the whole simulation aspect. I touched on Gartner earlier, and I mentioned that it's one of the top 10 technologies in their view for this year. A lot of you might have seen this is the Gartner hype curve. And hype is a very relevant term, I suppose, in this landscape right now. What we're seeing with companies out there, and you're probably seeing it too, is a mix of hysteria, a mix of fear, a mix of lack of understanding. And if you look at this, you can see it's very interesting. It might be quite difficult to see all of it, but this really is, I suppose, a profile of where all of the key enabling technologies in Industry 4.0 are positioned right now. And if you look closely, I think digital twin is still in the early stages. It's a nascent technology, and it hasn't yet reached where some of the other technologies like AR have in terms of that trough and disillusionment. So people were, I suppose, overpromised and under-delivered in terms of a lot of these technologies, and that doesn't help in the landscape of, I suppose, improving competency. So people are seeing they were promised X in terms of AR and Y was delivered, and therefore that can be a challenge in terms of what we do next for companies. And when they look at digital twin, they think, my God, will it really deliver what you say it's doing? So that's an interesting curve. I touched earlier a little bit about, this whole creation, this whole importance of IoT, sensorization, capturing information, responding to it. So how do we do it in essence? If we were to go tomorrow and create a digital twin, we would have to, in my opinion, create an infrastructure of interoperability between all of the existing platforms. Companies out there are overwhelmed by data. They've got data on their CMS systems, on their Salesforce systems, on their MES systems, on their PLC systems. It's all over the place. And that's one of the challenges we have, is what data do we use, and who gets it, and what do we do with it? So the starting point for digital twin is firstly that discussion. What data do we need to better inform you about a particular process or product? So you create a system in which you capture that data, you then communicate that data, you aggregate it, you interrogate it, and then you analyze it. And that all needs to be within the context of highly interoperable systems. But it's not without its challenges. As we go increasingly towards more data, we have that conflict between edge and cloud, that conflict between cybersecurity and early response and cost and risk. So that's a challenge. We have a challenge, I think, also in terms of what information we're using and who gets it and where and how it's communicated. So that's still there. So I think there's an awful lot of considerations still to be thought through before we really can feel that we're there in terms of digital twin. What I would recommend, and what I do recommend to companies, is to focus on the business need. If this isn't going to impact the customer, why the hell would you do it? So identify firstly where the customer need is. Does it make a difference to the customer? And what's important for the customer? What critical characteristics of a particular product or a process are important for the customer? Focus on those and create a digital twin of that particular process and keep it quite small and modular and build from there. Don't try to overpromise and undeliver because companies will fail. So why digital twin at all? Well, it gives you greater process control. You're responding to non-performance. You're seeing trends in a live environment. You're positioning yourselves to improve quality. You're enabling yourself to respond to non-performance and build the capability around change management. The people aspect is huge here. I haven't really touched on it, but it's enormous. People have to be embedded and involved in all of these processes. They have to understand the impact of it and how they can impact it. More robust and shorter new product development. So you see how product development, how a product is used in the field. You understand where it is deficient, and then you're able to better plan your new product development. Scalability advantages for sure. So you start modular and you build from there. Operational cost reductions, but I think digital twin for sure has the capability to bring all of the digital manufacturing and facility management, all of that stuff into one ecosystem. You're using sensors, you're using data, you're using a model, you're predicting, you're simulating, and you're doing it all within the context of improving the traditional challenges that we all have around cost, quality, time, and customer need. So I think it's an ideal technology, but let's not overpromise and undeliver. Let's focus on taking your time, building a cohort of expertise from an Irish context. And that's why I'm so energized about coming here today, because I think there's real opportunity for us guys in the manufacturing space, notwithstanding, and you guys in the facility management and construction space, to really look at overlaps. Because I think as a nation, if we continue to work in silos, and say that's manufacturing, that's supply chain, that's construction, then we do ourselves a disservice. And I think we're ideally positioned now to change that landscape, and that's why I'm here. So thank you.
Thanks very much, Bill. We will move on to our final speaker of the morning, and that's Dr. Barry McCauley. Barry is a chartered construction project manager and lectures full-time in digital construction engineering. He did a PhD in building information modelling and has experience in construction and facilities management, and has worked for 2 years as a postdoc researcher. So Barry, if you would take us through your talk, and then we'll move on to, if you prepare your questions, I'm sure there'll be a lively discussion after this.
So good morning everyone, my name is Barry. I'm a lecturer in the School of Multidisciplinary Technologies in TU Dublin, and I'm also working with Construction IT Alliance on a research-based initiative. This research-based initiative has, I suppose, come to its conclusion, or near enough to it, through the publication of our BIM in Ireland 2019 report. CitA commissioned a study at the beginning of the year with academics from the School of Surveying and Construction Management and the School of Multidisciplinary Technology at TU Dublin, as well as in Trinity College Dublin, to investigate a number of different research initiatives across Ireland. And what we have produced now is this report. And essentially, in a nutshell, this report looks at BIM maturity in Ireland. So where are we? So where are we? Where are we going? And the whole idea of looking at this report was that since 2017, when the original report was released, there's been a roadmap, there has been a digital strategy, there's been a lot of talk, but realistically, where are we as an industry? Have we improved? Have we disimproved? Have we advanced? So that's why we decided to come together and see, okay, let's get some answers to this. As we can see, building information modelling shows no signs of stopping in terms of its growth, its advertisement. Recent publications here, such as the Expert Group and Future Skills, Engineers Ireland State of the Report, Construction Centre Performance, Access Jobs and Plans, all put building information modelling still as a key enabler to increase productivity within the industry, to make it more interesting for people that are, let's say, across and abroad, trying to pull them back, and then overall just offering a more innovative and interesting way of doing business. So what we did is we launched a set of BIM macro maturity models. We worked with academics, Dr. Mohammed Qasim and Dr. Bilal Sukar, who enabled us to use their template, and we applied this in 2017. And essentially what this looks at is the different markets in Ireland and the BIM maturity. So what I'll just do now is I'll run through very quickly where we are 2017 to 2019, and more importantly, what I'll do is I'll show you exactly where we are in the roadmap using these figures. So I'll go back to the 4 pillars of the roadmap, and what we'll be able to see at the end of the presentation where we are at this moment in time, what we've done, and importantly, what else we actually have to do in order to progress it. So the first model looked at to establish the extent of BIM diffusion across markets. So what this looked at was how advanced we are when it comes to BIM technologies or modelling technologies, modelling processes, and collaboration practices. And as you can see here from 2017 to 2019, there's been a nice increase across processes and policies. So we have seen an improvement in the last 2 years when it came to technologies, and those technologies we further integrated collaboration and then further responding towards processes. So why is that? Well, the improvement of policy and process in regards to BIM collaboration fields can be partially attributed to the roadmap and government's digital strategy. A more significant development has been the introduction of ISO 9650. The maturity model should exhibit further growth in the coming years as the National Standards Authority of Ireland now offers third-party certification to ISO 1960 Part 2. However, while there has been improvement, it's not a significant improvement. It's not like we're top of the leaders, but in all fairness, you take a win where you get it. There is an improvement in that regard. The next model investigated the BIM maturity of countries using a comparative matrix of using component-specific matrices. So what this model looked like is looked at objects and milestones. So we can see there's an improvement there. Champions and drivers, frameworks, noteworthy publications, education, benchmarks, standards and deliverables, and infrastructure. And what we can see once again here, there's been another in this model as well. And we can associate this is the reason why our objects, milestones and frameworks have improved, because strategy, the roadmap, and ISO, it has had an effect on the industry. It is offering something, I suppose, that we can pin our hopes and pin our kind of colours in terms of finding something that's standardised and somewhere to follow. And a lot of companies, despite the roadmap not say advancing to the level we would like to advance, are looking at it as a possible benchmark for their companies to understand what it should be achieving over a 3 to 4 year process. While other figures have significantly grown, others remain stable. So some of them haven't grown, but just remained or plateaued. Ireland's technology and infrastructure continues to track forward investment, with Project Ireland 2040 firmly placed for businesses and communities across realising their potential. And learning and education remains strong. And this is one of the key things that we found as well in the learning and education. If we look at this here, I reached out to all different universities and colleges in Ireland and asked them what their BIM programs and what they're doing. And what we can see here is that nearly every one of them have essentially really moved on in what they're offering. And what they're starting to do now is they're starting to integrate a number of BIM modules into the undergraduates. And they're starting to offer interdisciplinary collaborative projects where they're saying, okay, civil engineering, construction management, quantity surveying, mechanical, let's all bring together into an interdisciplinary project, as well as a number of new postgraduate courses coming online. Another thing that I found is that there are a number of different research initiatives going on as well. So 2017 we were a bit light, 2019 we've seen a number of Horizon 2020 projects being commissioned. Bill's after having a great discussion there from the work on the UL. We have Dr. John Spillane here as well, who's doing a number of good initiatives as well in this particular space. So John's here, one of you like talking in that particular area. UCD have BIM-based research initiatives in Model 3 definition. DCU are making funding available for postdoctoral scholar, FESCA IFC. Horizon 2020 BIM-SAR project is looking at how we can integrate a training, microbyte training modules into the supply chain to help upskill people that mightn't have access to go to 3 to 4 years in college. And as we can see in here, the BICP team of TU Dublin Trinity College continue to do work in this particular area. So, an interesting one here. This diffusion model looked at who's leading us. Is it top down, bottom up, or middle out? And what we're finding again, results have not changed in this particular area. What we're finding is that the large contractors are the ones leading this particular area. So the SMEs are feeling a bit alienated. They're kind of finding it difficult to get into this particular space. And the reason why, as we see throughout the presentation, is that there's no funding available to do so. The top-down strategy, even though the government have put in place a digital strategy and the roadmap is there, there's no one leading it. So once again, the larger organisations, the big contractors, the ones reaching down and upskilling into the supply chain, as well as the educational and the likes of CitA, the likes of training organisations as well. This model investigated what way the government are approaching their BIM strategy. So what we had last year was a very passive approach in 2017, so we looked to make aware, encourage and observe. While, let's say in the UK, it's a bit more assertive, prescribe, enforce and control. So somewhere in the middle will be maybe the best option. Ireland, as we can see in here, are quite similar, but you have moved to a more active approach in regards to communication. So what does this model tell us? Well, we know that the construction sector group, which ensures a regular open dialogue between government and industry, has been put in place. So this has helped create a more passive approach. And they will come back with a set of recommendations in regards to advance the decline of productivity within the sector. While results have improved in comparison to 2017, there is a slight reduction in incentivisation despite an increase in training, meaning that despite training progressing and people getting on with it, there's not a lot of, I suppose, funding available or incentivisation for people to actually take up building information modelling. These figures will be predicted to decrease or stagnate if the government fails to provide the industry with more encouragement and support BIM. And that's kind of the key message here. While there has been a bit of an increase in the last 2 years, if when we come back here in 2021, it will be quite concerning and say that these figures could really stagnate or regress. And the final model looked at comparing the roles played by different stakeholders. So that looked like who are the key roles in education, in the industry, and as well as in the technology sector. And what we found is in 2017, the technology developers were seen as the most influential technology players. However, developers, providers, and advocates are now seen as co-leaders of the space. For the policymakers, which is concerning, the education institutes continue to have a much higher BIM future compared to policymakers. So despite these, a move in a number of particular areas, milestones, objectives, the education institutes are still seen as the kind of go-to in terms of advice in policy. The survey also shows a significant drop for policymakers within this area, and construction organisations are seen as key process players. However, industry organisations and community practice are also ranked highly. And that kind of brings us to the BIM and Umbrella Forum, and that was another part of the initiative here, where we brought together this forum, and it just offered another venue in regards to, we brought the heads of different bits of committees, and they could have a space to integrate and discuss and talk and share ideas and thoughts. And now they were doing this without a doubt. This just gave another opportunity for this to happen. And some of the really important feedback I've been giving over this, and been terrific work done by the RRI with Michael down there and Ralph in regards to the release of the RRI bin pack. Fantastic. CIF have released a number of important documents helping. SESI are now working on the RIA bin pack to integrate with their practices. So every one of the institutes are doing something in this particular space. The NSI, for example, have had a number of members attend CEN committees. They have released the certification program, and as well as they are working on the addendum to the ISO 9650, and they have a committee put in place for that now and working in that regard. So, what does it all tell us about the roadmap? Where are we? Where are we going? And what is our progress? So let's have a quick look. So the first one that we're looking at is our leadership pillar. While government has not provided leadership required as of yet, there's still evidence that the industry continues to mature. And that, in all fairness, goes down to the industry saying, okay, we're not getting leadership, but this is a better way of doing business, and we're going to work within it because we can see it. That's just a better way of doing things. So in the recent MBS CitA survey, it was reported that 76% of respondents had adopted BIM. According to macro maturity models, leadership was represented by construction organisations, professional institutes and third level education. Despite no strategic funding being provided today for the government sector, some organisations continue to push BIM. A collective consortium of industry bodies have presented their findings to the CSG on a roadmap to what services the Centre for Excellence should offer. So part of the leadership was a Centre of Excellence. So we looked into this as another initiative of this kind of overall CETA's kind of goal this year. And what we put in here is a potential framework, a generic framework. We looked at Alexandra's the Centre built Britain. And what we did was we looked at, okay, well, what are typical missions, what are typical scope of services, so we come up with different kind of scope of services. Scope selection, so what kind of partner models are available, what kind of funding models are available. So it's a generic kind of model just put in place to offer different opportunities or alternatives to kind of getting this up and going. The standard is quite impressive. The NSI has now developed a BIM certification program. There's the development of a national annex, ongoing release of templates and guidance documents such as the RI BIM Pack. 3 Irish experts attend the CEN. Funding available for a postdoctoral scholar. There are a number of really exciting and important standards out there at the moment, such as BRE. John's here today, so we're happy to talk to you about that. Kite Mark is another one, but there is a number of really, there's a lot of opportunities available in the market here, and that's making it quite interesting and making the selection, real focused. And the development of online tools supports to help implement national tools is yet to be progressed. So we're missing that one. Education and training. Third level education sector continues to be seen as the primary entity for upskilling. Professional institutes also continue to upskill. Organisations such as CETA, as we see here, continue to offer these events which are vitally important. To target skill shortages, core what we're suggesting is look at the likes of Class Your Own, as well as the likes of BIMcraft. We've had these different presentations here. I want to look at how they went into secondary school and use these initiatives to kind of get secondary school students up and going. And Class of Your Own has been run in Portobello for the first time here in Ireland, so that model is coming across here, and that's quite exciting in regards to getting secondary school students interested in construction. At present, the National BIM Education Task Force has not been established. The Department of no online BIM assessment tool is available, and there is no alternative national framework of qualification levels being progressed. So these are things missing. And where we have procurement, we have a procurement phase BIM mandate for public works projects to commence in Q2 2019. As of yet, there's no online support, and concerning maturity, despite rising in this area, benchmarks and processes will stagnate unless clear direction is progressed. So in summary, Ireland has shown a steady increase in some aspects of BIM. The Irish EA sector has, by default, led this agenda. There are still many vital objectives to be reached within the roadmap that have still not been met. We find ourselves at a crossroad, and we need a push from industry, we need a push from government in order to advance the BIM maturity within the sector. We cannot afford to stay static, and we must advance in line with other global jurisdictions. And realistically, there is a requirement for some form of funding and some service to be put across in order to advance, in order to achieve what was set out in the roadmap. I would advise you to read the BIM in Ireland 2019 report. It will be available, if not today, in the next day or two. This report goes into detail on all of these initiatives. It's a light read. It's not only over academic. It's kind of industry based as well. So please have a read of it. It's definitely worth an understanding where we are, because we spend a lot of time really gauging the industry, and this report is exemplary in regards to where we are at the state of the art in Ireland. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Barry, for a very good overview. Now, we're moving on to the Q&A. So I think, given the range of speakers we've had today, we just want to close that out. Given the range of speakers we have today, I would class it as follows. We had the advocate in Alexandra, we had the developer in Bailey, we had the skeptic in Greg, we've had the academic with Roger, we've had another innovator in Anand, and Barry has given us an overall summary. So we have a good mix and lots of issues to talk about. One observation I would make is that there's no question but that in going into the digital area, that there are skills required, and those skills are not just required in the employer organisation or in the contractor organisation or in the consultants or in the operators or facility managers. There is a level of skill and knowledge needed in all of those organisations about how to work in the digital area. And, what I would say, the first thing I would say about today's discussion is, if ever there was an illustration of the need for collaboration, this morning has illustrated it. Interesting that we are in an industry which is the least integrated of any industry that you can think of out there. We have employers who sit in their own organisation. We have loads of different discipline type consultants that sit in their own organisation. We have contractors who sit in entirely different organisations, subcontractors they rely on who sit in entirely. And what often happens in practice is there is a level of competition going on to survive commercially in that whole process. And that doesn't make the process efficient. That makes our industry inefficient. And I think perhaps Greg was describing the reality of the industry. So there's a massive change needed, and that massive change requires a lot of upskilling. Digital twins is the subject of today. And digital twins, my company is working in that area for quite a number of years, and I have to say to you, we had about a 4 or 5 year period, and we had about 2 or 3 completely false starts, spent a lot of money, got nothing back. So working in this area is challenging. I'd like to go on to the questions and see what issues you'd like to raise. There's one question I have for Greg before I start, and I'd just like to clarify. When you say, Greg, you spent between something like 2 to 2.5 million on a BIM model, that would be about 3 or 3.5% of the project cost. And was that over and above what you would traditionally have expected to pay for the various disciplines that combine to deliver your project? Phenomenal. I'd love to work for you if you're paying that. I'm not aware of any project, and we've worked on a lot of projects, Ireland, Australia, UK, USA, where a BIM model has cost anything remotely approaching that. That's an interesting one from our perspective. What does the cost add? And the reason I'm asking this is that one of the main issues around working in the digital space is that some people do not acknowledge there is any extra cost up front, and others acknowledge that it's there but have difficulty proving a business case for spending that money. And money is the root of all of the businesses we work in. And if it's not commercially proven, and it's difficult to prove it if you haven't delivered in this space, then there are lots of challenges. So with that thought, let's move on to questions. Who would like to ask the first question?
speakers up here?
Oh yes, sorry, I should have asked the speakers, should have invited the speakers to come up.
Barry?
And thanks, Barry, for a very comprehensive summary of the infrastructure step. So who'd like to ask the first question?
I might ask one actually.
Go ahead, Al.
Greg, that was refreshing, honest assessment of where we are. Is BIM suited for every project?
Are you saying refreshing and honest? I now know I've insulted a whole heap of people. I appreciate your feedback. I don't think it is. And I think in terms of the cost, they're real costs. I mean, I didn't make them up. Our quantity surveyors were asked that particular question. And they ripped right the way back through the model, and they asked themselves the question, what would we have done if we hadn't tried to do this to BIM level 2 in accordance with the EAO or AIO and OIO that we set out? And they calculated it out. I trust their figure out, and it felt like it. Okay. It actually felt like it during the project. So I don't, in terms of answer of the question, and Anne alluded to this earlier, until everybody gets to do this together as a collaborator in a collaborative environment, I don't think BIM is for everyone. So kind of akin to autonomous vehicles. Until everybody's driving them, it's not safe, in my view.
The theory is it shouldn't cost any more, it should cost less.
I don't know how that could happen right now.
Well, it shouldn't, if BIM becomes routine business, then it certainly shouldn't add significantly to the bottom capital cost. Anyway, that's just my view.
Yeah, that's. I'd say in practice, and after many years of having teams working on projects like this, there's no question, but working in the digital space requires higher competence. Right. It requires earlier development and consistency in modelling for it to be successful. And therefore, you're requiring higher caliber people. You have to develop your designs to a higher standard. You have to work with the operator and facilities manager if you're going to get it right. And if you don't, you're going to end up probably with no great benefits at the end. So the life cycle is where the benefits should come, not just in the initial phase where you're spending 7 or 8% on developing your project. It should come during there should be savings, and the theory is in your capital cost, but the real savings come over the lifetime. And I don't see, and we don't see digital and working in that space as something that just brings benefits during the construction stage. And I think we all have to begin to think about the whole cycle.
Sorry, just to circle back on one part of to conclude my answer to it. Anand is doing a phenomenal exercise with our facilities and services team at the moment to demystify the BIM model we've created. To take out all of the steel that's in the basement that nobody needs to see because we'll never see it again unless we're demolishing. Take away all the repetition of all the plates and all of the information that isn't useful to us. Yeah. And I asked Anand this morning, can I see what goes onto the editing room floor when he's finished? Because I think it's going to be substantial. When we strip out this model and we stupefy it, I want to see what's on the editing room floor and price it. And I'll tell you how much of the money we spent on it actually ends up going into the bin.
Could I just add to that we shouldn't forget that other people have generated this paperwork and this information, and they may have had value. So you're talking from the point of view of a client. So in terms of, say, a successful contractor using BIM and the type of information that they need, in terms of a consultant protecting the client against claims and the evidence that you need in order to do that, one must, I know it's only the beginning of the life of the structure, but some of those things are necessary. So even though it ends up on the cutting room floor, don't discount it completely.
Question over here. Can we get a microphone to the lady here?
Hi, my name is Clena O'Sullivan. I work in the Smart City section of Dublin City Council. But as you see, when the logos come up again, the QS department of Dublin City Council are very active, specifically Mary Flynn. and she is a one-woman campaign to bring, you know, the planning process and the building process up to date with the technology. And in future, the use of BIM is going to save people time and money, because they'll be able, developers and clients and all, you know, people will be able to submit their model into the planning process before they actually have a finished model, and therefore they'll be told what's wrong with it and what it needs to do to comply with building regulations and so on and so on. So I know it's at a very early stage, but like effectively, for example, planning permission process, it's like 5 generations of technology out of date. So bringing it up to date is a big ask, but it will be worth it in the end, because, you know, from the point of view of myself and Veronica, who are both, Roger, you'd be glad to know, graduates of Trinity Engineering School, we're working in smart cities where we're trying to use innovation and new technologies and so on to improve the services offered to the citizens of Dublin. And all this use of BIM and having the information there from the beginning of a life cycle of building will bring huge improvements to the lives of citizens and the environment of the city and so on. So, sorry, it's not really a question. I just wanted to put, you know, from the other point, from the local authority point of view.
I think that's a very useful perspective, because one of the bare bugs of our current systems in Ireland is the fact that everything in planning has to go in paper copy.
Yeah.
And, you know, if ever there was a case or a need for digitalisation, the planning process should be absolutely digitalised yesterday. So I think that's a good point you're making. I'd like to ask the panel, in terms of innovations, what do we need to do to manage information better? Because what we're really talking about here is information in a digital model, which must be intelligently structured and intelligently used. Are we capturing the right information? Have we the technology to capture and use it efficiently if we talk about working within the whole life cycle?
I would say that the starting point is a recognition that information models are not restricted to a design tool. Most times we tend to use the term building information modeling and models and tools like Revit and ArchiCAD, and all in the same context. Design tools have a place, and information management systems need to use design tools as a data source and be much richer in terms of how it interacts with other data sources which are involved in the production of information during a design, construction, or operations phase. That mindset shift is critical, in my opinion.
I agree entirely. I think our industry is fantastic at producing data. We produce loads of it, but to turn it into information that we can really use, that's what we don't do so well at the moment. So we need some form of framework, some form of organisation to be able to access the information that we want, when we want it, how we want it, and we need a way to make all the different sources of data that feed into that information interoperable. So I'm agreeing and thinking that if we can get that framework in place, if we can get the interoperability in place, then we'll really be able to get the value out of the information that we have.
Can I say, in my office, when certain things come in on a particular topic, I have a particular pile where I just take that information and I put it in the pile, and the pile builds up. And then at some stage I have to go to the pile and sort out the bits that are important and throw out the bits that are not. That's a lack of discipline on my part, and I think one of the things I hope I got across is that at the very early stage, the client needs to decide what they want, and through some type of platform, and with the assistance of the consultants and the contractor, have it at the forefront of their minds as to what information they need for their own purposes, which I've just highlighted a moment ago, and what's actually needed for the client to operate the facility. So that actually needs the people who are working with BIM on a daily basis to restructure their thinking a little bit, to think about what is it the client needs that I can put in an organised way, rather than building everything up and then trying to find the bits that are important. So if that happens at the earliest stage and the client decides, and this is part of the problem, is the client doesn't always know what they want. So sometimes they need some help in that process as to How are you going to do this? Well, how are you going to operate it? How is it going to interact with the facilities you already have and the information you have? So one of the things I hope I got across is early client engagement. Yeah.
Okay.
Question here from John.
Yeah, John.
It's John from BRE. Just a question for Alexandra. You mentioned in your presentation the development of a Gemini compliant digital twin. Just time frame for that, and where do you see that fitting into construction blockchain?
So a number of organisations have already signed up to the Gemini principle. So, for example, the government's Digital National Asset Register has said they're going to base on their Gemini principles. At least one of the initial 6 that are involved in the DT Hub have said that they will run their digital twin on Gemini principles. So it's happening already. It will evolve. We know the Gemini principles themselves will need to evolve as we find out quite how it works in practice. So it's starting now. Will it ever be finished? I think it's going to be a constantly evolving thing. So I don't think there'll be a point where we'll be able to say it's never going to change again. We'll be able to say it's up and running, it's working, but it will constantly evolve.
I have a comment here online, just a quick comment from Bernard Vortman of Cummins and Vortman. And he says that BIM is not an added cost, only the initial implementation is costly for newcomers, but certainly BIM is valid for all projects in our experience. So that's from Bernard.
Okay, it's a question down from at the far end of the room. Can we get a mic down there, please?
Good morning, Niall Scott from the Technological University of Dublin. Could I just thank the speakers this morning for excellent presentations and excellent detail in relation to what's happening in digital twins and how we can move forward. And I suppose my question is around kind of data, knowledge, expertise. And I'm just wondering, do any of the panelists have any views on how we develop that expertise? What can we do in terms of actually improving the process, and how do we help one another within a community of practice, if you like, to actually embed the technologies that are available to us.
Thanks for the question. I think it's very timely and it fits with what we're trying to do in the community of practice context. I think certainly it's about doing a number of things. It's about developing, as I mentioned earlier, I suppose more bespoke, tailored training programs that are very industry focused, that are driven by industry need and are very clear and not obtuse. And also I think it's very important that we create a system in Ireland where we're showcasing best practice, and we're not afraid to do that. And the champions and the pioneers of great technology and great people are prepared to mentor and help those that are not further along that path. But it's a very interesting question, and it comes back, I think, to that whole idea of information sharing and data. And I think all of this, like success in these type of initiatives and changes, they're society. Like this is fundamentally societal change. It's industry focused, but it's societal change. It's going to touch all of us, and I think it comes back to that thinking that it's driven by people. Like we will get to the level where technically we're competent and capable, but it comes back to change management and people have to be the center point of it, and they have to drive it. You have to empower them and give them and de-risk it. But it's a very interesting question. I think it's fundamental to the success of both digital twin and manufacturing technologies, but also in a wider context and from facilities management and construction.
I think it would benefit the industry a lot if educational institutions add a program around information modeling for construction. Building information modeling is a term, but what we're doing today is building modeling. It's in geometry modeling with some of the schemas defined within design tools. So the ability to develop information models that drive different workflows, or bring data-driven workflows in construction and operations is a huge gap. That talent is missing.
Barry?
just to comment on that as well. In regards to the educational, I suppose some of the work being done in the education institutes isn't as visible, and it's kind of kept quite silent. I know, for example, in TU Dublin, the MSc in Applied Building Information Modelling and Management, the fourth year concentrates extremely heavily on technology, and then the second year is completely about processes. It's bringing the student all the way through the whole process of the IR, BEPs, ISO, so it's working within that bigger frame. And it's also making a lot of kind of, I know a lot of colleges as well are looking at interdisciplinary projects. So you'd have the likes of civil engineering and quantity surveying and mechanical, electrical engineering. They're all coming together and they're all working. And they're starting to kind of see that bigger picture of, okay, hold on, it's not just my responsibility for producing this piece of data, because I know if I just do this in my silo, it's going to impact on the quantity surveyor because they can't actually get proper quantities from this. And there's a number of research projects I know in the area of Horizon 2020, the BIM cert, where we're trying to bring in micro modules where users can just log on and say, hey, this is particular to me, this is what I need to know, and starting to kind of educate those that are not able to get to kind of the third level as well and reaching them. I know in the UK they had Scotland, they had road shows where they went to the different public sector bodies, and they had a road show there and they went into detail of the process, collaboration, and maybe taking the training to the public sector bodies and trying to kind of get them to understand, I suppose, not just the technology process side.
Thanks, Barry. One question to a couple of the panel. Bill has spoke about the Centre of Excellence for Smart Manufacturing and how it's got various partners and participants, and Alexandra has talked about the Centre for Digital Design Britain, or Digital Build Britain, and clearly the Science Foundation Ireland has funded Bill's programme, and government and industry has funded the Digital Build. But to me, there is a gap in Ireland in that for a Centre of Excellence, at the moment, there is no clear funding and no clear hub for the AEC industry in this area. And I certainly think, and I think Alan and others think this as well, that there is a massive gap. Individual organisations pursuing individual programmes, that's fine, we're educating our people. These ITs and universities are producing educational programmes. But where's the driver for the move from the passive state that Barry has shown in his report to a proactive state which will deliver the benefits? And I personally, I think we're badly missing that in Ireland. And either government or Science Foundation Ireland needs to recognise this, because this industry, the AEC industry, on average accounts for about 14% of GDP worldwide. We're developing rapidly, and we need to be in the area of excellence, not on the coattails of something that's happening somewhere else. So with that, Alan, I'd pass over to you to wrap up, please.
Thank you. If I could just impose on you all for another 20 minutes or so, because we have some rock stars in the room as well that we want to celebrate with a great win earlier this year. So just adding to what Jerry said there, I think the Confirm model is a really interesting model. The idea that no one research organisation or university would own a digital centre of excellence, but perhaps all institutes of technology and universities in the Republic could have a say and a role to play in feeding into a central hub. I think that's what the Digital Ireland should be looking at. So that's one of the reasons why we had Bill with us today. So just to thank our speakers, to thank Jerry, first of all, for doing a great job, Jerry, in chairing the event, and to Alexander and Bill, to Roger, Greg, Anand and Barry. I thought, the presentations were excellent, and of course the honesty and the pragmatism associated with each of the presentations was really, there was very little hype, I think, in those presentations, which was very refreshing to see. Talking about collaboration, we had a fantastic event in Galway no more than 2 weeks ago. I see some very familiar faces who were at it. It really was fantastic. And it was a great celebration both of local capability expertise, but also we had to celebrate the World BIM Skills, which we'll come on to in a minute, which was great. Building up on that theme, I suppose, of collaboration, we do have a suite of other events to follow through in 2019. On the 23rd of October, in the Grand Canal Square, Bank of Ireland Workbench, we are presenting a breakfast session on smart design and smart housing. And what we have is 3 very interesting tech startups in this particular space. Blockchain has been talked about, a new product called Archly, and also a very innovative, I suppose, prop tech company called Bagel. And so, you know, these events are free to drop into, take no more than a couple of hours. And of course, you're in the centre of real innovative activity down in the Smart Docklands. We're also going to be talking in early November about collaboration. Jerry mentioned collaboration. So we're looking at effective collaboration on project risk sharing by using IPD procurement. So this is the final event in the digital transformation series. And we're delighted that Professor David Mosey from King's College in London is coming over. And David has been advising many governments internationally, including the Irish government, in digital procurement. And I know our own many government departments are looking at new methods, new procurement techniques, and David's at the forefront of that. We're also hoping to put together a panel of experts in that particular space, and hopefully we'll also hear from the Office of Government Procurement. The following day, and for 3 days, we have a new initiative called the AEC Hive Swarm 2019, the brainchild of Ralph Montague. And this is really, it's like a hackathon, building on the successes of the DCC and the Dublin Docklands hackathon last year. But it's an opportunity, I suppose, for us to bring together a collaborative platform or a community of innovators. We're not very good at innovation in construction. So we have an open opportunity for people to submit a cluster proposal. So we have 4 clusters already submitted. We need 10 as a minimum. If we get more, that would be great. But we're going to have a social event on the Friday night, where everything will be explained. The various clusters will come to the venue. We're hoping that perhaps this might be of interest to some people in Confirm. It might also be of interest to maybe CDBB to maybe lead the team. And we will then have a very proactive day of developing the innovative proposals, and then we'll have a mini conference on the Sunday. So, you know, it's going to be held in 1 Millmill Lane down in the Docklands. Many of you have been there before. It's a fantastic opportunity. CitA are putting their shoulder behind the wheel on this one. This was a new venture for us. It wasn't on our programme for 2019, but we're hoping that you'll support us and come along, and that we get a minimum of 10 teams looking at all aspects of construction innovation. And we'll be sending on Susanna a link of the video following the event. So that brings us on really to quite an important element of the presentation of today's event. I was privileged enough to be in the RDS area this year at the Irish Skills event. And I could see everything from hairdressers to bartenders to carpenters, joiners, plumbers, you name it. It was absolutely fantastic. And there was a BIM skills competition there. And both Luke and Ryan, who are the recipients of the World BIM Skills, can we just give them a round of applause for that? Luke O'Keefe is based in Waterford IT, and Ryan is in TU Dublin. And the guys worked on the Irish competition, is that right? And then you were selected and you went forward to the World BIM Skills in Kazan and ended up winning the damn thing. And so I also want to introduce you to Ray English, who's with us this morning. Ray is part of the World BIM Skills team. And also Gordon Chisholm, who can't be here today. Gordon, I think he's at the Build event in Edinburgh. And Gordon would have mentored these guys, but countries like Singapore, Belarus, Poland, Russia were competing against these guys, and they ended up winning the competition. So when we heard about this news, we had to invite them to the gathering. Now, we don't have time today, but the guys came on stage, absolutely knocked it out of the park in regard to talking about what challenge they were given, how they set up their accommodating environment, the competition and competitiveness with the other teams. And they really did themselves proud and Ireland proud on the day. And so in recognition of that, the board of CitA decided to bestow on these two young men a life membership of CitA and also the award of the Hall of Fame or Construction Innovation Award for 2019. So, guys, you deserve it so much. Now, if there is a mic there, maybe we could just have a quick word with the guys. We'll take some photos later on. And maybe Ray, you might say a few words just on behalf of the World Skills team. And
hi everybody, good morning. My name is Ray English. I'm the technical delegate for Ireland to World Skills International. Surprisingly, this was the 45th competition in Kazan in Russia. It was the largest, 1,500 competitors. It was roughly about 300,000 square meters of competition space and 57 full competitions. But while I was just having a look and listening to Bill, if I can find some of the guys actually competed in what was the Future Skills arena. And some of the competitions in the Future Skills was looking at what competitions may look like in the future. Had everything, of course, from BIM to Industry 4.0, the Internet of Things, life cycle management, quantum technology, rapid prototyping, robotic systems integration, mineral synthesis and processing, mechanical reverse engineering, neurotechnological design. Absolutely amazing. And that was 10,000 square meters dedicated to what the future of this competition would look like. I think as Alan pointed out, we brought 17 competitors, 2 in BIM, but out of that whole team of welders and plumbers, as you've identified, beauty therapists, aircraft maintenance engineers, the overall team achievement, we got 4 gold medals, 1 bronze medal, 7 medallions of excellence. So 12 of the team brought home a World Skills International Award, which on the overall points gave us 10th position in the world of 63 countries, which I think is an amazing result. And it's down to the input that the likes of these 2 guys put in. Ireland, interestingly, was the country that sponsored BIM as a competition on World Skills with Autodesk. We also did the same with cloud computing, so we're really delighted with that. And as you said, we ran our first competition in the RDS, and we're delighted that the department have agreed we're going to run another one next year in March again in the RDS, we hope.
Yeah. Thank you, Ray. And can we hear from Ryan, just a few words, what it's been like, what it's meant to you?
Yeah, thanks for having us. It's been great experience to be here, and as a BIM gathering also as well to share the experience. So just give you a brief overview of what we had to do. So we had a competition over 3 days, and it was 19 and a half hours. So involved creating common art environments, architectural modelling, structural modelling, coordination, visualization, and corrected modelling. So yeah, no, it was a great experience. Everything, we had a 12-week training program before we started, and just covering all. And give thanks to Gordon, who can't be here, because he really led the team, and also to Ray and the rest of the team. Yeah, thanks again, Alan, for having us.
No problem. Are you going to Digital Construction Week at all? No.
Yeah, I am now.
You are. Okay. Are you coming to the embassy?
Yeah.
Excellent. So you better wear your best suit, and make sure you have your medal with you. Are you going, Luke? Well, we'll have to work that out. That's the Irish reception in the embassy in London next Tuesday night. So, Luke.
So yeah, just again, thanks for having us. And but no, it's all really good being recognised by everyone when we come home. But it's even more special when you get recognised by people in your own field. Because when you're talking to everyone, you're doing a couple of interviews, you kind of really have to dumb everything down, give them the basics. But so it's events like this where you actually appreciate and realise what it actually means to win something like this, and it really kind of just sets you up for a bright future.
Okay, well done again. Okay. What I might do is just give you your trophies, and then we'll just take a quick photo. Should we do that?
Yeah, or do you want to?
Finish it. Okay, maybe that's the best way to do it. Okay, so just to wrap up, and not to forget all the contributors this morning, but also going back to Galway, if I may briefly, because we actually had 58 presentations and 9 keynote presentations, and we got over 30 papers published that will be published in the next few days in a proceedings document, a number of which will be going to international journals for publication. And on the day we had winners, and everyone was a winner, but I suppose we had to pick the best papers. So I don't know if Trina is with us. Trina was the recipient of the Young Researchers Award, and Trina's paper was Critical Appraisal of the Potential for Public Works Contracts and Digital Build Science in Ireland to Leverage Benefits from BIM Process. And I think that's sponsored by ArcDocs. The prize, yes. I don't know, is anyone here from ArcDocs? We'll do the photos in a few minutes, okay? We also had a Best Industrial Paper by Jonathan Rogers. I think I saw Jonathan in the audience. Jonathan, you're very welcome. Jonathan's paper was the Post-Occupancy Digital Twin, very appropriate, a quantitative report on data standardization and dynamic building performance evaluation. So Jonathan, congratulations with your work with Barry Kerwin, sponsored by JJ Rattigan. I think Celine is here, is she? To give the award. And then our third presentation this morning will be the Best Industrial Paper by Frederick Leverve and Dr. Barry McCauley, an investigation into current procurement strategies that promote collaboration through early contractor involvement with regards to their suitability for Irish public works projects. So we're going to do all those photographs in a few minutes. I just want to say a final word to the guys, the CitA team, for their great work this morning in putting this together. But just to let you all know, we had a board meeting yesterday, and CitA are setting out on a very ambitious plan for 2020. We want to have 36 meetings in 12 regions, 3 events per region. Such was the success of Galway. We want to replicate that in Limerick and Cork and Waterford, Letterkenny, Athlone, wherever else we can get it, and maybe finish in Belfast. So we want to have 3 events. It's not just about Dublin, it's about the country. It's about getting the message across the country. So it's ambitious, but we're up for it. So what we need is support from the regions. And perhaps, Bill, Limerick will be our first port of call. So University of Limerick, Limerick IT, these are the people we need to be working with, and of course yourselves. So more about that anon, and we'll have some detail on that at our 7th of November meeting. So that's it. Thank you so much. I know how busy you are, the time you take. So we're just going to hand out the prizes now. Thank our speakers again, and our chair for this morning. It was truly excellent. Thank you so much.
Oh, Lord.
Right, guys. So, right.
The internet keeps making noise.
It's a bit of a nuisance, actually. Keep reconnecting it. You have to keep reconnecting it.
Yeah.
That's very different from because
Painful.
they're going to be used to being on
Yeah, he went to marketing and talked this morning, so all of us, like, they've taken his phone away from us.